Makoto stands before a girl who has just poured her heart out. She stammers her confession, but he remains unmoved. With a heavy heart, he offers a formal apology, explaining that his family situation makes such a relationship impossible. He leaves the girl in a state of shock, her face flushed with embarrassment and unshed tears. He offers a final, polite bow before turning his back on her, leaving her alone with her shattered expectations. Shortly after, he meets with a faculty member. He bows his head in gratitude, thanking her for her presence during the encounter. She, however, is visibly exasperated. She sighs, telling him to stop involving her every time someone confesses to him. He defends his actions, admitting he fears being caught in a cruel prank or a false confession. She warns him that such a guarded attitude will prevent him from ever forming genuine bonds. He simply dismisses the concern, stating flatly that he has no need for friends before excusing himself from the conversation. As he walks away, she reaches out, calling for him to wait and listen, but he continues his retreat, unwilling to hear any more advice. Alone with his thoughts, he reflects on his rigid self-preservation. He reasons that if he remains hyper-vigilant against false confessions, he can avoid the pain that once overcame him. He vows never to repeat the mistakes of his past. His mind drifts back to his elementary school days, a time when he was the boisterous class clown. He remembers the joy of making his crush laugh, her bright smile being the only reward he ever sought. The memory shifts to a chaotic moment on the playground. During a game, the girl tripped and fell hard, her cry of pain cutting through the air. She sat on the ground, clutching a scraped and bleeding knee. Before he could even process what happened, the other children began to point fingers, accusing him of pushing her as he stood frozen in shock. He stood frozen as the other children swarmed him, their voices a cacophony of accusations. They jeered at him for running away, their faces twisted in mock outrage, while he could only blush in silent, stuttering confusion, wondering where Shizuka had gone. The whispers soon turned into a deluge of lies that no one bothered to question. Every malicious rumor, that he threw rocks, destroyed notebooks, or hurled insults, was accepted as absolute truth, leaving his desperate denials to fall on deaf ears. As the weight of the collective scorn settled over him, he realized with a sinking heart that the world had already decided his guilt. The constant barrage of insults became a background noise he couldn't escape. Even the sanctuary of home offered no reprieve from the growing isolation. Though families are meant to be a final line of defense, the silence within those walls was just as judgmental as the shouting outside. The betrayal cut deepest when Shizuka herself confronted him, her eyes brimming with tears as she accused him of being a liar and a bully. He stood paralyzed, unable to comprehend how the girl he cared for could believe such fabrications. His domestic life was a minefield of neglect and strict expectations, made worse by a remarriage that left him an outsider in his own house. His mother, favoring his stepsister, offered no comfort, only a sharp command to return and apologize for sins he hadn't committed. He watched helplessly as she bowed her head in shame over a phone call, offering profuse apologies to another parent for his supposed misbehavior. When he tried to interject, to finally explain his side, she cut him off with a cold demand for his silence and obedience. Standing alone in the lengthening shadows, he reached a grim conclusion. If neither his peers nor his own flesh and blood would trust his word, then words themselves were useless. He decided then that he would simply stop talking. Years later, in the quiet halls of his middle school library, he found a different kind of silence. It was there that he noticed a classmate, a girl with braids and glasses named Nanako, who seemed to be a permanent fixture among the bookshelves. While navigating the quiet rows, he spotted a forgotten phone resting on a table and realized it belonged to her. He approached tentatively, breaking his self-imposed isolation just enough to return the device, catching her by surprise as he held out to her. He hands the device back to her, and she beams with gratitude, thanking him profusely for finding it in the library. This small interaction sparks a connection, leading her to ask him about his interests and what books he enjoys during their shared time in the library. For the first time in a long while, he feels a genuine sense of happiness. However, that fragile peace is shattered by a cruel misunderstanding. He is branded a predator who attacked her, leaving him isolated once more as she looks on in fear. Time passes, and he finds himself approached by another girl, Kisaragi, who unexpectedly confesses her feelings for him. He is skeptical, wondering why anyone would want to be with someone burdened by such dark rumors. She persists, suggesting they meet over the weekend and start as friends, her smile appearing warm and sincere. But the sincerity is a lie, revealed as a cruel joke orchestrated by her friends. He stands frozen as their laughter rings out, realizing he has been humiliated for their amusement. With a trembling hand, he deletes her contact information, the last remnants of his trust in others finally crumbling away into nothingness. The seasons turn cold, and as he walks through the winter chill, he is surprised when Inako calls out to him, her appearance changed, but her voice familiar as she greets him warmly. Despite the lingering whispers of his peers who warn her to stay away from the dangerous boy, she refuses to listen to their baseless gossip. She stands her ground, firmly telling her friends that he is not the person the rumors claim him to be, while he watches from the shadows, stunned by her defense. He stares at the glowing screen of his phone, where a group chat buzzes with plans for a weekend karaoke outing. The casual invitation to bring a friend or two feels like a cruel joke, a stark reminder of the social world he no longer inhabits. This digital interaction triggers a bitter memory of the boys who once mocked him, their faces twisted in derisive laughter as they ridiculed the very idea of him being close to someone like Nanako. They had sneered at his reserved nature, labeling him as nothing more than a repulsive outcast. The sting of that past humiliation burns fresh in his mind, his face flushing with a mix of shame and self-loathing. He realizes with a heavy heart that he has been betrayed far too many times, and that letting his guard down was a mistake he cannot afford to repeat. As the school day ends, his solitary walk is interrupted by a familiar voice calling out his name. Shizuka Miyazaki, a girl from his past, waves enthusiastically, suggesting they walk home together as if the years of silence between them never existed. He pauses, his brow furrowing in confusion as he watches her approach. It strikes him as bizarre that she would reach out now, especially since she had ignored him throughout all of middle school, and he finds it suspicious that so many of the girls who once turned against him have ended up at this same high school. Deciding that this is a complication he doesn't need, he turns away, his expression hardening into a mask of indifference. He tells himself that her sudden interest is not his concern and that the safest path is to remain uninvolved. Despite his cold shoulder, she persists, trailing behind him with a casual, almost mocking commentary on his solitary state. She notes how gloomy he has become, bluntly stating that his lack of friends is hardly a surprise given his current demeanor. The bluntness of her words causes him to flinch, his gaze dropping as he tries to process her sudden, jarring offer of friendship. She smiles brightly, her expression seemingly sincere as she suggests she could be the companion he clearly lacks. He finds the entire situation fundamentally wrong, his mind racing to reconcile her current kindness with the harsh reality of his middle school years. She continues, claiming that she never truly believed the malicious rumors and had simply thought he was being too forceful in his own defense back then. A deep skepticism takes root as he listens to her talk of belief and trust. He remains silent, his jaw set tight as he wonders why, after so much time and so much damage, she would choose this moment to try and bridge the gap between them. He stands there, stunned by her sudden request to return to their old, carefree days. She smiles brightly, urging him to stop being so meek and act like they used to, as if the intervening years of silence never happened. Because of this sudden shift, he can only manage a single, pointed question. Why is she choosing this moment, after so much time has passed, to reach out? In response, she begins a lengthy explanation, her expression softening with a mix of regret and hope. She admits to being scared and nervous in the past, citing their different classes as a barrier, but insists that starting high school has finally given her the courage to change and find it. As she finishes her plea, he looks away, his eyes clouded with a pain she doesn't seem to grasp. He quietly asks her to stay away from him, a request that catches her completely off guard. Shocked by his rejection, she reaches out to grab his arm, her voice rising in confusion as she asks why he's being so strange. He pulls back, his resolve hardening as he repeats his desire for distance, reminding her that things aren't as simple as she thinks. The weight of the moment forces him into a deep, formal bow. He offers a sincere apology but begs her to stop pursuing this reconciliation, his voice heavy with the burden of their shared history and the scars she left behind. Straightening up, he delivers a final, crushing blow, telling her that it is simply too late for her to claim she trusts him now. Her face pales, the realization of his deep-seated hurt finally beginning to sink in. Without another word, he turns and retreats behind the safety of his home's gate, the metal latch clicking shut with finality. She is left standing alone on the sidewalk, calling out his name into the empty air as he disappears inside. Once inside, he is immediately met by his older sister, who has been watching from the doorway. She asks with a knowing look if he was just with Shizuka, her presence a stark contrast to the tension he just left behind on the street. He attempts to brush past her to head upstairs, his tone clipped and formal as he announces his return. She just smiles, teasing him for being so stiff and reminding him that they are family, even as he suspects she was eavesdropping on the entire exchange. He steps through the front door, greeted by the familiar sight of his sister and Shizuka. Haruka's teasing voice rings out, reminiscing about a time when he was a brighter, happier child, a stark contrast to the somber young man he has become. As Shizuka takes her leave, Haruka turns her attention fully to him, expressing surprise at the unannounced visit. She suggests a celebratory outing for his first day of school, her phone in hand as she checks her schedule. The suggestion triggers a wave of internal resistance. He reflects on the fractured state of their family since the incident with the Miyazakis. With their father constantly away for work, he has retreated into a shell of solitude, finding comfort only in his books and the quiet of his own mind. Sensing the weight of his withdrawal, he offers a quiet apology to his sister, promising to be more mindful of his actions. Haruka watches him with a look of lingering concern, the distance between them palpable even in the small hallway. Later, in the sanctuary of his room, he loses himself in the world of his own creation, writing web novels as a means to drown out the reality of his life. A notification pings on his screen, revealing two new messages, one a heartfelt review and another that catches him off guard. His eyes widen as he reads the second message, a formal inquiry from a publishing company expressing interest in his work. The prospect of professional recognition hangs in the air, a sudden and unexpected shift in his quiet existence. Despite the initial shock of the offer, a sense of dread quickly follows, leading him to decide that such a development would only bring unwanted complications. With a decisive click, he closes the laptop, choosing to bury the opportunity and pretend it never existed. The following day at school, the lack of sleep from the previous night's revelation weighs heavily on him as he navigates the hallways. His gaze falls upon Shinizuka, who sits alone at her desk, a girl surrounded by whispers and rumors that mirror his own sense of isolation. To his surprise, she approaches him with a tentative request to share their lunch hour. He observes her, recognizing a kindred spirit, someone who, like him, seems to be navigating the treacherous waters of unwanted social expectations and landmine friendships. He grants her request with a detached air, telling her they can talk once she has finished her meal. As she reacts with a mix of surprise and relief, he maintains his distance, feigning a lack of memory regarding their previous encounters to keep his emotional walls intact. He watches silently as a classmate tries to engage Shinizuka in conversation, only to be brushed off. The girl playfully accuses Shinizuka of trying to shoo her away, but Shinizuka remains focused on her book, her expression guarded and uninterested in the social pleasantries. Seizing a quiet moment, he leans in and expresses interest in the volume she is holding, asking if he might read it once she is finished. Shinizuka looks at him with a mix of surprise and suspicion, her sharp eyes searching his face for any sign of mockery. With a sharp click of her tongue, she thrusts the book toward him, her gesture brusque yet compliant. He accepts the offering with a polite word of thanks, the physical exchange marking a rare breach in the wall she has built around herself. Their interaction does not go unnoticed, as the other girl laughs in genuine shock, remarking that she has never seen Shinizuka engage with anyone like this before. He realizes then that the isolation surrounding Shinizuka is absolute. She is a ghost in the classroom, a person whom no one else even attempts to approach. He reflects on the toxic atmosphere of the school, where baseless rumors have turned Shinizuka into a pariah. People have chosen to hate her based on whispers rather than reality, a cycle of social exclusion that seems impossible to break. This realization brings a bitter clarity to his thoughts, as he considers how easily people judge others without ever seeking the truth for themselves. He finds himself repulsed by those who follow the crowd, deciding that he has no desire to let such shallow individuals into his own life. Sitting back at his desk, he dwells on the classmates' surprise at their brief exchange. The weight of the situation settles on him. The simple act of borrowing a book has become a significant event in a place where silence is the norm. As he watches her return to her reading, he acknowledges the irony of his own actions. He understands that if anyone should be questioning why he is suddenly involving himself with the school's most avoided student, it is he himself, yet he finds he cannot turn away. Haruka offers to take one of the heavy bags, but Makoto quickly declines. He explains that if his mother were to see him letting her carry the load, she would undoubtedly be furious with him. He continues walking, his thoughts drifting back to his earlier interaction with Shinizuka. He finds himself questioning why he even bothered trying to speak with her, noting that such an uncharacteristic move simply wasn't like him. Ahead of them on the quiet street, the girl in question walks alone. She carries a plastic bag, her gaze fixed forward with a somber, distant expression that seems to isolate her from her surroundings. She suddenly glances down at her phone, and a faint, unexpected smile softens her sharp features. From behind, Nanako watches with a mix of surprise and disdain, commenting on the sight of the supposed delinquent walking ahead of them. The girl with the braids finds the smile unsettling, questioning why someone with such a reputation would be looking so pleased. She even begins to doubt if the stranger is actually wearing their school's uniform. Suddenly, the blonde girl's eyes narrow into a sharp, intense squint, as if she has spotted something troubling in the distance. He notices the sudden change in her demeanor, wondering what could have caused her to look so guarded all of a sudden. Nanako dismisses the behavior as mere weirdness, reminding him of the girl's reputation as the mean-looking delinquent that the entire school gossips about. She seems convinced that there is something inherently off about her. Turning her focus back to him, she asks a blunt and unexpected question about why the two of them stopped being close. The inquiry catches him completely off guard, leaving him momentarily speechless as they walk. She then admits the truth behind her past behavior, explaining that she was deeply jealous of the time he spent with Shizuka. Because he always chose to play with her instead, she felt neglected and decided that she wanted to bully him as a way to vent her childhood frustration. She had finally laid bare the truth of her past actions, but the weight of those words was quickly eclipsed by Haruka's own admission of guilt regarding the rumors that had poisoned his home life. She reminded him of the painful time when he was betrayed by those who believed the lies and even turned his own mother against him. Haruka's tone shifts as she playfully chides him, suggesting that his lack of attention toward her was partly to blame for the distance that grew between them during those dark years. With a sudden burst of energy, she raises her arms and declares her renewed faith in him, admitting that her previous suspicions about the rumors were entirely misplaced and that she always knew her cool Oniai-chan was better than that. He takes a deep breath, forcing himself to remain composed and vowing internally to never repeat the errors of judgment that led to such isolation and pain. She offers a gentle, knowing smile, claiming that despite the chaos and the lies, she was the only one who truly maintained her belief in his character throughout the ordeal. The air grows heavy as she asks if she might return to calling him by his old nickname. But he remains firm, explaining that while he seeks forgiveness, the scars of the past cannot simply vanish, and things cannot go back to how they were. Stunned by his rejection, she quickly masks her disappointment with a casual excuse about her groceries melting and departs, pointedly addressing him by his formal name instead of the familiar title she craved. Later that night, the only sound in the room is the rhythmic clicking of keys as he loses himself in his work, the glow of the monitor illuminating his focused expression in the darkness. He pauses, the weight of the earlier encounter with Haruka still pressing on his mind, realizing that her words had affected him far more deeply than he initially cared to admit, yet he finds the resolve to keep writing. His eyes scan a message from a reader named Pamiko, whose heartfelt words of encouragement and gratitude for his writing provide a sudden, much-needed sense of purpose and salvation. He sits alone in the dim light of his room, the glow of the monitor reflecting in his tired eyes. The messages from Pamiko-san have become a rare source of comfort, a stark contrast to the usual silence from his readers that often leaves him feeling isolated. With a soft click of the mouse, he finalizes his work, a quiet sense of resolve settling over him as he whispers a simple acknowledgement of the task completed. He leans back, stretching his stiff limbs after hours of intense focus, the overhead view capturing the isolation of his small sanctuary before he prepares to face the world outside. Stepping out into the morning air, he checks his phone one last time, but the screen remains stubbornly blank, offering no new words of encouragement to carry him through the school day. Upon arriving at school, his path crosses with familiar faces. Shizuka and her protective companion, Momo, pause as they notice him approaching through the crowded hallway. Before he can pass by, Shizuka calls out his name with a sudden urgency, her voice cutting through the ambient noise and forcing him to halt in his tracks. She steps forward, her cheeks flushed with a mix of nerves and determination, declaring her desire to speak with him directly rather than through the safety of a screen or from a distance. However, the moment is interrupted by Momo, who steps in with a confident air to formally introduce herself as Shizuka's best friend, her sharp gaze sizing him up. The blonde girl offers a knowing, almost challenging smile, leaving him to realize that her protective stance is no mere act. She is fully committed to her friend's well-being and won't be easily swayed. Turning back to Shizuka, he finds her pleading for a fresh start, her eyes shimmering as she insists she didn't lie in the past, and asks to move forward by going to a movie together. She is embraced tightly by her friend, who showers her with praise, calling her an adorable and good-hearted girl. The protective companion then turns her venom toward the young man, branding him a violent offender and dismissing his past grievances as irrelevant nonsense. He remains silent, questioning whether the girl's supposed kindness is genuine or merely a facade, while she attempts to de-escalate her friend's growing rage over what is being called a fraudulent confession. Despite the chaos, he realizes that she never once attempted to bridge the gap of his distrust, even as her friend continues to belittle him in comparison to her perceived innocence. Deciding that a blunt, harsh truth is the only way to break through, he prepares to speak, just as another girl with pale hair approaches from behind. A sharp, piercing gaze from the newcomer cuts through the air, causing a startled gasp to escape from those nearby. The silver-haired girl confronts the one who claimed to be a friend, her expression hardening into one of pure intimidation as she questions the audacity of such a claim. Memories of a time when they were supposedly close flicker by, filled with empty promises of future outings that now feel like a hollow mockery. The betrayal boils over as the silver-haired girl screams her disappointment, her voice cracking with the weight of the trust she once placed in him. He attempts to silence her outburst with a cold request for quiet, but she only manages to hurl one final insult before the tension reaches its breaking point. She unleashed a torrent of bitter questions, challenging them on whether they had ever faced baseless slander or the sting of betrayal from a trusted friend. Her voice was sharp as she told the other girl to stop speaking with such unearned authority, pointing out that they were completely clueless about the reality of the situation. Having said her piece, she stood her ground and coldly requested that they simply leave her alone, stating her only desire was to be free from any further trouble and to move on from the drama they caused. As the weight of the confrontation settled, the girl in pigtails began to sob, her distress evident as her companion called out to her in concern. Shinizuka, however, remained unmoved, noting that the damage was already done and could not be reversed by mere tears. Turning her back on the scene, she walked away alongside the young man, letting out a sharp, dismissive huff that signaled the end of the encounter and her lack of interest in further discussion. Sometime later, the tension of the confrontation gave way to the quiet of the school day. The young man sat alone at his desk in an empty classroom, lost in a book as the sun shone over the campus buildings outside. His solitude was eventually interrupted by the presence of the silver-haired girl, who sat nearby, her face flushed with a mix of irritation and focus as she stared intently at her phone, seemingly ignoring his presence. While she took a long drink from her bottle, her eyes never left the screen, leading him to conclude that she must be deeply engrossed in a web novel based on her intense focus and the way she handled her device. Suddenly, her expression brightened into one of pure excitement, and she let out a cheerful exclamation of agreement with whatever she was reading, her previous irritation completely forgotten. Watching her frantic typing, He checked his own device, only to find a lack of new notifications, though he couldn't help but be impressed by the speed of her fingers as she responded to the content on her screen. He wondered if she was reacting to the new chapter he had posted the previous day, hoping for some kind of feedback on his latest work while she remained unaware of the author's identity, sitting right beside her. He exhales a breath of relief, glad that his work resonated with her. Though he considers replying immediately, he decides to wait until the next chapter is complete, not wanting to seem overly eager after her long silence. Unbeknownst to him, a pair of sharp, light-colored eyes are fixed upon him from across the classroom, narrowed in a gaze of intense scrutiny. As he sits at his desk, the weight of that stare becomes impossible to ignore. He glances over to find her staring directly at him, her expression unreadable and unsettling, leaving him utterly bewildered by her sudden focus. The silence is broken by the sharp chime of a notification. He pulls out his phone just as she begins typing with frantic, rhythmic speed on her own device, her movements jerky and desperate. A new message appears on his screen from Pamiko, bearing a cryptic and open-ended subject line, if it's possible. He stares at the screen, his brow furrowing in confusion as he tries to decipher the meaning behind such a vague request. Beside him, she is a portrait of mounting panic, her face flushed a deep crimson as she realizes the implications of her own words, her mind racing in a loop of embarrassment. In her flustered state, her grip falters, and her phone slips from her trembling hands, clattering loudly against the floorboards with a startled cry. His attention is immediately drawn to the device lying face down on the floor, specifically to the distinctive Pomeranian mascot sticker decorating its case. A sudden, jarring realization begins to take hold as he looks from the sticker to the girl trembling beside him. The name Pamiko echoes in his mind, and he can't help but whisper the first syllable of the alias that connects his secret world to the girl sitting right next to him. He stares ahead, a bead of sweat rolling down his temple as he grapples with a sudden, unsettling realization. His gaze shifts to the girl sitting in front of him, her long, light hair a stark contrast to the heavy thoughts weighing on his mind. He finds a strange connection forming in his mind, wondering if her nickname, Pamiko, was inspired by the fluffy Pomeranian mascot that looks so much like her. He quickly covers his face with his hand, desperate to shut out the intrusive thoughts and regain his composure. She lets out a soft, embarrassed mumble nearby, her cheeks flushed as she struggles to find the right words. He remains frozen at his desk, his eyes wide as he observes her from a distance, the tension between them palpable. He feels a sudden tightness grip his chest, his heart hammering against his ribs as he wonders why he can't stop sweating. He places his hand firmly over his phone on the desk, trying to ground himself with the reminder that they aren't even friends. The teacher arrives for the start of homeroom, providing a much-needed distraction from the internal turmoil. She looks away, her expression unreadable as she decides to simply erase the message and try to forget the whole encounter. She may have already moved on, but he finds himself unable to follow suit, staring at the school building while resolving to delete her message only after homeroom ends. As the morning hours tick away toward 11 o'clock, the young man pushes the task further back, convincing himself that it can wait until his classes are finished. By the time lunch arrives at nearly 1, Makoto's resolve wavers again, and he tells himself he will deal with the digital ghost after he has eaten. He looks down at the dark screen of the device in a heavy, contemplative silence. Covering his face in a moment of weakness, he finally admits to himself that the message is something he simply cannot bring himself to erase. The start of the final homeroom brings a new wave of exhaustion, making him wish for nothing more than the quiet of his own home, while he dismisses the urgency of the message as irrelevant for the moment. Beside him, Shinizuka stands as a silent, imposing presence while the teacher acknowledges the completion of their recent midterms. She projects an intense, almost suffocating aura, a defensive wall of intimidation that he realizes is meant to keep the world at bay by instilling fear in others. The mention of an upcoming trip and the necessity of forming groups causes him to recoil internally, his mind racing with the need to avoid further social entanglements and stop his thoughts from drifting back to the girl beside him. He recalls the hollow isolation of past excursions where he was always alone, and feels a familiar, nauseating dread at the thought of being forced into a collective once more as the teacher encourages the class to coordinate with friends. He decides it's time to head home immediately, his mind already set on a quick exit to avoid further social strain. Beside him, Shinizuka lets out a sharp gasp of surprise, her face flushing as she realizes he's leaving without another word. Without lingering, he offers a brief, formal apology and steps away, leaving her standing there with a look of mounting frustration and a flurry of unspoken words that she seems unable to voice. Once he is gone, she slumps at her desk in the empty classroom, a bitter curse escaping her lips. In a sudden burst of pent-up irritation and loneliness, she lashes out, kicking the furniture with a sharp thud. As he makes his way down the hall, she suddenly reappears, her voice sharp and defensive as she warns him to stop his perceived attempts at friendship. Her eyes flash with a mix of anger and embarrassment, her outburst echoing through the corridor as she demands to know why he was looking at her. Their tense exchange is interrupted by the arrival of another student, Miyu, who casually inquires if Shinizuka is his friend. She doesn't wait for an answer before making it clear that she harbors no affection for the girl, her bluntness creating a new layer of social friction. This newcomer had completely reinvented herself for high school, shedding her former identity as the quiet, plain girl involved in the library incident alongside Nanako. She had undergone a total high school debut, transforming her appearance to the point of being unrecognizable to those who knew her before. She begins to reminisce about their past, telling him how she used to be a plain girl who was far too shy to speak to boys until she met him. She claims that their shared time in the library was a highlight she would never forget, describing those days as incredibly fun despite their recent lack of communication. With a playful, exaggerated gesture of embarrassment, she wonders aloud if their past connection could be described as a first love. She covers her face with her hands, her cheeks glowing with a feigned or genuine heat as she calls the thought totally embarrassing. Her tone shifts to something more probing as she questions the loneliness of his current isolation, asserting that she is fully aware of everything that transpired after their time together, implying a deep and perhaps unsettling knowledge of his history. She then drops a chilling revelation, noting that his sister and all the other girls from his past, Miyazaki, Nanako, and Kisaragi, are present at the school. She asks if he truly hadn't noticed their presence, a fact that leaves him visibly shaken, his face pale as the weight of her words sinks in. She offers a bright, apologetic smile, suggesting that since the fault for their past friction was shared, they should simply put it behind them and return to being friends. Continuing with an upbeat tone, she explains that her experiences with romance games have taught her to learn from mistakes and strive for a better outcome, dismissing any need for further dwelling on the past. With a playful flourish, she dons a pair of dark-rimmed glasses, presenting herself as a nostalgia bomb and eagerly asking for his approval of the familiar look. He, however, remains shrouded in a somber internal conflict, desperately trying to suppress the rising tide of middle school memories and the confusing emotions triggered by her appearance, reminding himself to stay detached and empty. Noticing his distraction as he holds his phone, she teases him about whether he is trying to sneak a photo of her, playfully insisting that he at least use a flattering filter. He looks down at his device to find a heartfelt message from her, expressing her excitement for the next chapter of his writing and promising her continued support, a gesture he never expected to receive again. As they walk together, a mutual understanding of their individual natures begins to take root, though she is suddenly startled by something regarding the digital image on his screen. Later, walking alone, he finds himself buoyed by an unfamiliar sense of happiness, realizing that her genuine interest in his work has created a bond he feels he must honor by completing his story. Though he ponders when a true resolution to his personal struggles will arrive, he resolves to channel this newfound inspiration into his writing immediately upon returning home. The quiet exterior of the residence stands still as the day's emotional turbulence settles into a focused creative drive. He stands in the hallway, his expression guarded as his older sister stops him. When she asks for a moment of his time, he quickly deflects, claiming he has plans to meet a friend. Her response is immediate and biting, a blunt reminder of his social isolation, as she points out that he doesn't actually have any friends to meet. This cold dismissal triggers a vivid memory of a much happier time, when his younger sister would beam with pure joy at the prospect of an outing. She would cheer, her face lighting up as she begged her favorite brother to take them all shopping together. In that memory, their older sister would encourage the excitement, telling the young girl to get ready since he was already prepared to go. The child's enthusiasm was infectious, a stark contrast to the heavy silence currently filling the house. But the warmth of that memory is tainted by the bitterness of reality. He recalls the sting of his middle school graduation, a day when his sister took the young one out without a word to him. Now, she speaks of family as if those fractures never existed, leaving him to wonder what could possibly be going through her mind. The weight of the past continues to press down on him, bringing forth the voice of his mother. Her words were always sharp, questioning his choices and dismissing his efforts as a waste. He realizes then that some things, like a mother's nature or the scars of the past, do not change easily, even as he tries to assert that he finally has a friend. Back in the present, his older sister watches him with a steady gaze, warning that a sudden family outing would only lead to complications. Beside her, the younger girl tilts her head, her eyes wide with a playful yet cutting curiosity. She asks if his imaginary friend can wait, her voice bright as she suggests they go out for a meal instead, seemingly oblivious to the tension radiating from it. Her playful prodding causes him to look away, a bead of sweat tracing down his temple as the pressure of their expectations mounts. The memory of her wanting to hold his hand and walk together feels like a phantom weight, pulling at a version of himself that no longer exists. Breaking the spell, he abruptly announces his departure, catching the girl off guard. He offers a hollow apology, admitting that his own words carry little weight these days, and turns to leave the suffocating atmosphere of the home behind. Once outside, he finds a measure of peace in the cool air, reasoning that with his sister likely heading to the new mall, he can safely disappear into the quiet shadows of the old, neglected shops where no one will recognize him. The shopping center stands quiet under a bright sky, its large signs overlooking the district. Inside, Makoto breathes a sigh of relief, grateful for the empty food court. He settles in, thinking this is the perfect place to work on his novel without any distractions, but a sudden sound catches his attention. He looks over to see Shinizuka sitting alone at a nearby table, her gaze fixed intently on her smartphone. She lets out a soft, genuine giggle, her face lighting up as she scrolls through her screen. Watching from the shadows near the restrooms, He wonders what could possibly have brought her to this secluded spot. Her expressions shift rapidly from surprise to a warm, lingering smile, a side of her he rarely sees. He remains still, observing the stark contrast between her public persona and this private moment of joy. Moments later, she sets her phone aside and begins typing furiously on a laptop, her focus entirely consumed by the screen. Her eyes narrow with concentration, a slight blush creeping onto her cheeks as she pours her thoughts into the digital page. He lets out a quiet, weary breath, his own thoughts swirling as he tries to make sense of the scene before him. Pulling out his own phone, he navigates to a specific page and sees a startling announcement. A novelization is in the works. The realization hits him like a physical blow as he looks at the screen. The author, Pamiko, is a novelist whose updates stopped a year ago, and the girl sitting just a few feet away is the very same person. He stared at the screen of his phone, absorbing a heartfelt comment left on the latest chapter of the novel. The reader expressed how much the story meant to them, empathizing deeply with the struggles of the protagonist, Mike Saburo, and offering words of encouragement for the author to keep writing despite the difficulties. With a quiet resolve, he approached a nearby service counter and ordered 2 orange juices. As the clerk confirmed the order, he reached into his pocket for payment, his expression hardening with a sense of purpose as he prepared to finally bridge the gap between himself and the girl working nearby. Moments later, he stood silently behind the girl as she remained hunched over her laptop, completely lost in her creative process. Sensing a presence, but not looking up, she snapped a sharp warning for any would-be flirt to leave her alone, before immediately psyching herself up to dive back into her writing with renewed energy. The sudden realization of who was actually standing there sent a jolt through her, causing her to jump in shock. Her face flushed a deep crimson as she let out a startled cry, demanding to know exactly when he had arrived and frantically telling him to stay back in her embarrassment. They sat across from each other in the quiet cafe, the air thick with unspoken tension. She leaned forward, her face flushed as she stammered out a suggestion that perhaps they could be more than just acquaintances. Before she could finish the thought, he interjected with a cold finality. He looked away, his expression unreadable as he stated plainly that he had no desire to be her friend. The words hung in the air, sharp and biting, leaving her wide-eyed and reeling from the sudden rejection. In response, she bristled, her hurt quickly turning to defensive anger. She demanded to know what had happened to his usual polite demeanor and told him to leave her be, insisting that while she had her own share of rumors, they couldn't possibly be as toxic as his. He acknowledged the whispers surrounding his own reputation with a shrug, admitting he simply didn't care whether they were true or not. However, his curiosity was piqued, and he questioned if the stories about her had truly become so severe. She turned her back to him, her silhouette tense, as she declared her intention to withdraw from everyone entirely. The weight of the world's judgment seemed to press down on her, fueling a desire for isolation. The reality of her situation was grim. The rumors circulating about her were indeed far from harmless. Dark whispers painted a picture of a girl involved in violence, extortion, and illicit relationships with older men. These accusations followed her like shadows, distorting her image in the eyes of her peers. There were even stories of her prowling the streets late at night, her face etched with a desperation that few could understand. Despite the weight of these allegations, he reached out, sliding a drink toward her as a small peace offering. He dismissed the gossip with a wave of his hand, calling the rumors nothing more than foolish nonsense. She reached out and gripped the cup, her hand trembling as she voiced her deepest fear. She was tired of the lies and refused to be deceived by anyone ever again. She lashes out, her voice cracking with desperation as she demands to be left alone, vehemently rejecting what she perceives as a facade of compassion and fake kindness. In the heat of the moment, the cup is struck, sending the liquid splashing violently across the surface. He moves suddenly, his hand reaching out to steady her, or perhaps to address the mess, catching her off guard and instantly silencing her outburst. He offers a quiet apology as her eyes widen in realization, noting that her clothes have been stained by the accidental spill. He takes the full blame upon himself, admitting that his sudden offer of a drink was poorly timed, while she struggles to find her words, the anger visibly draining out of her. Shifting the conversation back to its original purpose, he asks what she truly wants from him if a friendly exchange was never her intention, his expression remaining unreadable. He then delivers a cold, blunt truth, explaining that he has no desire for friendship either, preferring the safety of isolation over the inevitable sting of being betrayed. Stung by his indifference, she fires back with equal frostiness, declaring her own lack of interest in a bond before ordering him to get out of her face. The room falls into a heavy, oppressive silence, the empty chairs and tables bearing witness to the fractured interaction between them. Before he departs, he poses a question that cuts through her remaining defenses, asking why she abandoned her writing and addressing her by a name that clearly carries significant weight. She recoils in shock, her face flushing a deep crimson as she stammers out a question, desperate to know how he could possibly have discovered her secret. Makoto remains impassive, his gaze steady as he absorbs her frantic reaction. Because of her panic, she immediately jumps to conclusions, accusing him of hearing rumors from their classmates. He quickly cuts her off, his voice flat as he assures her that he has no intention of becoming her friend, urging her to relax. Despite his attempt to de-escalate, she remains agitated, her voice rising as she brings up another name, Nienta, and insists that his lack of social interest is no excuse for knowing what he knows. He simply looks away, the straw of his drink still in his mouth, seemingly unfazed by her outburst. Her frustration boils over into a shout. Her eyes squeeze shut as she berates him for the dark nature of her own work, specifically the high body count she tends to include. In response to her outburst, he adopts a more somber tone, confessing that her writing had a profound, painful impact on him. He looks her in the eye, offering a piece of earnest advice. She should treat the lives of her characters with more care. Moments later, he pulls out his phone and asks for permission to read her current work, admitting he hasn't seen any of it yet. She looks away, her expression a mix of pride and lingering annoyance, finally relenting by saying she'll allow it only because of the appeal of her female lead. As he begins to scroll through the pages, he notes the shift in genre toward romance, calling it a venturous choice. This sends her into a fresh panic. She lunges toward him, desperately claiming that her older writings were merely essays and not the fiction he's currently viewing. He continues his critique regardless, pointing out the jarring nature of her narrative structure, which often begins with an information dump or a sudden death. Her face burns with embarrassment as she begs him to stop making fun of the romance genre and to put the phone away. Eventually, the shouting dies down, and they settle into a tense silence as he continues to read. She watches him out of the corner of her eye, her finger pressed to her lip in a gesture of nervous anticipation, waiting for his verdict. While he remains deeply engrossed in the digital pages, his head bowed in concentration, she shifts her gaze toward him. A small, subtle smile plays on her lips, her initial hostility replaced by a quiet curiosity about the boy who took her stories so seriously. She sits across from him in the quiet of the restaurant, the air between them still heavy with the remnants of their conversation. She flinches as a loud, traitorous rumble echoes from her stomach, breaking the silence and forcing her into a defensive, embarrassed huff. Her unexpected hunger interrupts his thoughts on how knowledgeable she is and how much they have actually spoken, leading to a sharp exchange where she insists she simply skipped lunch. He suggests that she should probably get something to eat before heading home, a practical observation that earns him a lingering, unreadable look. He finds himself opening up as she admits her family dynamic is strained, nearly complaining about his own overly trusting relatives before stopping himself. His attention is drawn to a vibrant figure approaching from the distance, her cheerful presence contrasting sharply with their somber mood. She bursts into their space with an exuberant greeting, announcing herself as the older sister come to collect her and Richan with a beaming smile. Her arrival leaves the two students stunned, with the younger girl's face flushing a deep, indignant red as her composure completely shatters. They watch as she leans in with playful curiosity to ask if he is a friend, while the younger girl desperately tries to maintain some shred of dignity. She is met with a perfectly synchronized denial as both students bark out at once that they are absolutely not friends. She remains stoic as her older sister, Siko, beams with delight. The elder sibling introduces herself warmly, expressing genuine joy that her sister has finally found a companion her own age to spend time with. She watches as the young man offers a polite, formal greeting, identifying himself as a classmate. Siko's eyes light up with sudden recognition, and she squeals in excitement, comparing his appearance to a popular anime protagonist, much to his bewilderment. Her excitement is cut short when the silver-haired girl turns to leave, her face flushed with irritation. She firmly reasserts that they are not friends and tells him she is departing, though she slips and uses a peculiar nickname, Nienta, before quickly telling him not to read into it. She looks away as he simply nods in quiet agreement, his expression unreadable. He confirms that he has no intention of claiming a friendship that doesn't exist, matching her cold and distant demeanor. He remains silent while she shouts her departure once more, her voice sharp with a mix of embarrassment and frustration. Siko, however, pouts at the sudden exit, wishing they could stay longer to chat and get to know each other better. She freezes as they prepare to part ways, hearing a voice from the distance call out to her by name. A look of pure panic crosses her face as she realizes a secret might be slipping out in front of her sister. Her panic grows when the sister catches the name Nienta being used again in the background. Siko's expression shifts from playful curiosity to a sudden, sharp realization as the pieces of a puzzle begin to click into place. With a sudden burst of energy, she lunges forward, her eyes wide with shock and awe. She demands to know if he is actually Nienta-sensei, the author of a specific light novel series, her voice trembling with the excitement of a true fan who has just met their idol. She continues her interrogation, claiming she heard the name clearly and that it explains why he's the only one who can talk to her sister. While the girl frantically denies everything, he stands there, paralyzed by the sudden exposure of his secret life. The older woman is now completely overwhelmed by her discovery, leaning in close with an intense, almost predatory focus. She demands an editor's meeting and questions why he hasn't been responding to her messages, leaving him utterly speechless as his secret identity is laid bare. She confirms that she sent the revisions for his serialization just a few days ago, catching him off guard. He begins to piece together the connection, realizing the implications of her professional role in his secret life as an author. Because of this sudden revelation, the younger sister snaps, loudly declaring that they aren't friends at all. The older woman merely pouts in response, teasing them for keeping their relationship a secret when they clearly seem close enough to be more than acquaintances. As they walk through the quiet city streets at night, she continues her lecture, explaining that whether he accepts the situation or not, he clearly needs time to process everything. She adds that her sister had been genuinely worried about his lack of response, which had eventually turned into frustration. Moments later, she begins to head home, noting that they live nearby and suggesting they postpone the professional talk about his serialization until a better time. She waves a cheerful goodbye, leaving the two students alone in the evening air. While she gushes about the destiny of their professional pairing, the younger girl dismisses the sentiment with a sharp whatever. Watching the exchange, he can't help but marvel at how fundamentally different the two sisters are in personality. He reflects on how little he actually knows about his classmate, wondering if her guarded nature is a reaction to her sister's overwhelming brightness and constant optimism. The contrast between the girl's serious gaze and her sister's radiant smile is stark. Finally, he catches himself, shaking off the intrusive thoughts and wondering why he is even dwelling on her at a time like this. Siko confirms her role as an editor, clarifying the professional connection between her and Anri. Makoto feels a sense of relief, having worried that his success was the result of favoritism or someone pulling strings. Siko admits her own surprise at being assigned to him, noting she hadn't expected to be in charge of his work. Anri spots him and calls out his pen name, Nienta, with a start. Siko quickly explains that her professional life is entirely separate from her sister's company, ensuring there is no conflict of interest. She is left flustered and embarrassed by the realization of her sister's involvement. Siko reassures them both, insisting that his serialization was earned through the quality of his work alone, not through any personal connections. The young woman offers a begrudging thanks, her face flushed with a mix of gratitude and lingering irritation at the awkward situation. Makoto remains silent, his gaze fixed forward as he processes the weight of the revelation and the complexity of their shared history. He contemplates the nature of his bond with Shinizuka. While Siko sees them as close friends, he cannot easily forget the shadows of the past that still linger between them, making him hesitant to accept such a simple label. Anri notices the sudden shift in his mood, questioning what has caused his expression to darken as the city lights begin to twinkle in the distance. Their quiet moment is shattered when Nanako and Mirai appear, their eyes wide with disbelief at seeing him out with a girl. He attempts to move past the encounter, but their voices ring out, demanding he stop and explain himself. He begins to walk away, ignoring the desperate pleas echoing behind him. Nanako and Mirai call out to him, begging for just a moment of his time to explain themselves and bridge the distance that has grown between them. Despite their persistence, he remains silent, his expression unreadable as they insist their only intention is to offer a sincere apology for their past actions. They seem desperate to make amends, but their words hang heavy in the air. The two girls are overcome with emotion, tears streaming down their faces as they sob and implore him to wait. Their composure is completely shattered, their voices cracking as they beg for a chance to be heard. He stares ahead, his thoughts a bitter swirl of resentment. He wonders what an apology could possibly fix now, knowing that words alone cannot undo the weight of what they did to him in the past. The scars run too deep for a simple sorry to heal. Suddenly, a firm hand grips his sleeve, and Shinizuka steps forward with a flushed face and a look of fierce determination. She addresses him by his pen name, urging him to leave the scene behind and ignore the girl's pleas. This unexpected intervention catches him off guard, and he realizes with a start that the girls behind him aren't even aware of the secret identity he and Shinizuka now share. The confusion on his face mirrors the tension of the moment. Behind them, the sound of rhythmic sobbing continues as Nanako and Mirai remain rooted to the spot, their grief and regret laid bare in the open air. She reacts with a sudden, intense blush, her eyes wide and her breath hitching as the weight of her own boldness finally seems to register. Their departure is interrupted by Siko, who beams with an oblivious, cheerful energy at the sight of them together. She comments on how nice the scene looks, prompting him to quickly clarify that his previous comment about being meddlesome wasn't directed at her. He watches as the energetic Siko clings to a flustered Anri, who desperately tries to maintain her distance. Anri's face is flushed with embarrassment as she insists they aren't friends, while Siko playfully complains about the perceived unfairness of Anri's closeness with him. His gaze remains steady, taking in the chaotic but warm interaction before him with a quiet, contemplative intensity. As they walk down the quiet, lamp-lit street, he quietly agrees with the sentiment that things have finally begun to shift. This shift in dynamic leaves Nanako and Mirai standing in stunned silence, the memory of his previous coldness toward Anri serving as a painful reminder of the distance between them now. He turns his attention back to Anri, who still looks agitated. He acknowledges the harsh reality that the deep-seated wounds of the past cannot be easily erased, even as they attempt to move forward. Nearby, the two girls are overcome with emotion, tears streaming down their faces as they witness something they hadn't seen in a long time, a genuine, soft smile appearing on his face. He offers a soft, sincere expression of gratitude to Anri, calling her by her nickname and admitting that her presence has helped him finally begin to lay some of his old burdens to rest. Observing from the periphery, Siko is struck by a sudden realization. She had doubted his claims of having a social life, but seeing him now, she recognizes the genuine bond he has formed. The next day, the sun shines brightly over the school, marking a fresh start after the emotional confrontation of the previous evening. Inside, he checks his phone, expressing his appreciation for the consistent messages of encouragement Aniray sends him every morning, a small gesture that has clearly made a significant impact on his well-being. He reflects on the quiet distance that has settled between them at school. It has been several days since their last real conversation, and he finds a strange comfort in this boundary, convincing himself that their current arrangement is sufficient. Despite the silence in the hallways, she remains a constant presence in his digital life. She continues to send him supportive messages regarding his writing, especially now that his latest novel has been released, bridging the gap that exists during the school day. This routine is interrupted when the teacher announces that the time has come to organize groups for the upcoming school trip. The classroom, once quiet, begins to buzz with the nervous energy of students seeking out their friends. As the clock ticks past 2, the room erupts in emotion. Students stand and gather, the familiar social hierarchies of the classroom manifesting as groups quickly begin to solidify. He remains seated, watching the chaos with a detached sense of resignation. He knows his own lethargy and social standing will likely result in him being left behind, and he observes that she seems to be facing a similar fate. Nearby, a group of boys scoffs at the idea of including him, deciding he is better off on his own. When the conversation shifts to her, the girls in the group react with open disdain, making it clear she is not welcome in their circle. The weight of the rejection, or perhaps the sheer frustration of the situation, finally breaks her composure. With a sharp, guttural groan, she slams her hands onto her desk, the sound echoing through the immediate area. She then marches toward a group of her peers, her expression a mask of grim determination. Her sudden approach catches them off guard, leaving them whispering in confusion as they try to process her unexpected assertiveness. Ignoring the stares of the teacher and the bewildered looks of those around her, she stands before the group. Even Inako watches with a mix of surprise and curiosity as the usually reserved girl takes center stage. She makes no effort to hide her irritation, declaring her desire to finish the task quickly so she can return home. With a swift, decisive movement, she reaches out, ready to force a conclusion to the social ordeal. She steps up to the chalkboard, her hand moving with sharp, decisive strokes as she scrawls names across the dark surface. This sudden, bold move leaves her classmates in a state of stunned silence, one girl gasping in disbelief at the sheer audacity of the display. Turning back to the room with a defiant glare, she points to the names, declaring that their group consists of only 2 people now and demanding to know if anyone has a problem with it. The teacher, observing the tension, asks if the final decisions have been made, to which she dismissively replies that the class difference is irrelevant as long as the groups are formed. As the classroom settles, he watches her with a mix of confusion and wariness while she drops in her seat, crossing her arms in a defensive, irritated posture. Her face flushes with a mix of embarrassment and lingering anger as she snaps at him, clarifying that her actions weren't an attempt to be friendly, but merely a means to finish the task and go home. He can only offer a resigned sigh in response, his expression shifting from mild surprise to a weary acceptance of the situation. The two sit in a heavy, awkward silence, physically close in the classroom, yet emotionally miles apart as the school day nears its end. This arrangement between Shinji Makoto and Shinizuka Anri is a matter of convenience, not connection. She makes this perfectly clear as she prepares to leave, her thoughts echoing the cold reality that, despite their new arrangement, they are not friends by any stretch of the imagination. She had established a cold distance between them in the classroom, yet a fundamental truth remained unspoken. Regardless of their public standing, they were still Nianta and Pamiko, tethered together by a shared history and a secret world that existed far beyond the reach of their judgmental classmates. She leans in, her expression a mix of frustration and earnestness as she urges him to be more direct with his feelings. She points out that even if he claims he can't be as straightforward as she is, he still needs to find his voice. He acknowledges her point with a quiet sigh, the weight of the conversation lingering between them. Seeking a reprieve from the pressures of their daily lives, he suggests they set aside the topic of school for the time being. As the silence settles, his mind drifts toward his writing. He contemplates the progress of his latest chapter and the daunting possibility of professional publication, realizing how long it has been since he found himself in such a contemplative state outside of classroom setting. The word publish echoes in his mind, a heavy concept to grasp. Beside him, she's a contrast of energy, her eyes bright with anticipation as she explains that she has finished a section for tonight's upload and only needs to add a final polish. He remains lost in a sea of conflicting emotions, his face partially obscured by shadow. While he feels a sense of honor that his work has been recognized, the reality of his age and the potential burden on his parents weigh heavily on his conscience. Sensing his hesitation, she offers a reassuring smile, reminding him that there is no rush to decide. She mentions the upcoming meeting with her older sister, describing her as someone who might appear distant but possesses a fierce passion for her craft. He watches her as she continues, her tone softening. She explains that her sister's intense focus on work is the reason she has never pursued a romantic relationship, despite her undeniable charm. She suddenly becomes flustered, a deep blush creeping across her cheeks when he questions her affection for her sibling. She stammers a defensive reply about them simply being family, leaving him to ponder the complex weight of that single word. His thoughts darken further as he considers his estranged father, wondering if the man he hasn't seen in years would even approve of his literary ambitions. Noticing his deepening gloom, she calls out to him, her voice cutting through his melancholy. Standing before a ramen shop, he tries to shake off the heavy atmosphere by proposing a creative challenge. He asks for a theme, and she eagerly suggests an outdoor class, setting with a 500-word limit, her competitive spirit reignited. He expresses doubt about the nature of their relationship, yet he finds himself agreeing to her proposed challenge, a short story competition to be judged by her older sister. He is taken aback by her sudden burst of energy as she declares herself the winner in speed, leaving him to wonder what the true purpose of this battle even is. She looks at him with a gentle, knowing gaze, and in that quiet moment, he is struck by the sudden realization that he is actually smiling. He tries to hide his face as she playfully mocks his emotional state, teasingly asking if he's about to cry, because her writing is so much better than his. She is met with a genuine, warm smile as he looks up and admits that she really is amazing, his sincerity catching her off guard. He watches her giggle in response to his praise, the lighthearted exchange providing a brief respite from the anxieties of his professional future. She is no longer there the next morning when he prepares to leave for school, replaced by the mundane routine of home and his mother's inquiry about his early start. He stops in his tracks, the sight of his mother triggering a cascade of painful memories, echoes of her past warnings to never bring shame or trouble upon the family. He listens as she tells him to speak his mind rather than just standing there, yet he can't help but reflect on how she always tried to be the perfect mother, despite her coldness. She represents a looming hurdle in his mind, as he agonizes over how she will react to the news of his novel, fearing her tendency to deliver truths that break the heart. He stood alone, the weight of his secret heavy on his shoulders. He doubted his mother's trust, wondering how she would ever accept that a mere high schooler like him was selling a novel written as a hobby. As he prepared to leave, his sister's voice called out to him, but he dismissed her with a wave, his mind already racing toward his meeting with Siko later that evening and the lingering thoughts of his school life. Suddenly, she pressed a piece of kuzumochi into his hand, catching him off guard. Despite her usual chatter about going out together, she simply offered a bright smile and wished him a safe journey. Later, within the quiet confines of the staff room, their teacher looked up from her desk, expressing her surprise at how well he and Aniray seemed to be getting along as friends. The two of them stood in silence, the air between them thick with the unspoken complexities of their arrangement. Their teacher quickly corrected herself, noting that while they might not be friends in the conventional sense, she still expected them to stay out of trouble, reminding them that she was, after all, their homeroom teacher. She leaned forward, her expression softening as she offered herself as a confidant, an adult they could turn to for advice when their own families fell out of reach. Continuing her lecture, she spoke of the world's irrationality and how school served as its miniature reflection, urging them to find at least one person they could truly trust amidst the chaos. He countered her idealism with a cold, hard truth, arguing that the inevitability of betrayal made the very concept of friendship a liability he wasn't willing to entertain. A look of nostalgia crossed the teacher's face as she listened to his cynicism, softly wishing that they would both eventually find someone so precious that even the sting of betrayal wouldn't diminish the value of the bond. She had just finished her cryptic lecture, leaving Aniray bewildered by the concept of not minding betrayal. Makoto, however, remained silent, his expression unreadable as he processed the weight of the teacher's words. After dismissing them, she watched as the two students prepared to leave. Aniray, feeling the heat of the moment, snapped at Makoto, accusing him of staring at her when he should have been minding his own business. As they walked down the hallway, the sound of their footsteps echoed the lingering confusion in their minds. Makoto couldn't help but wonder if the teacher's advice was simply a warning not to skip their outdoor classes or something far deeper. Their quiet departure was suddenly interrupted when a girl rushed toward them, her face flushed with a mix of anxiety and determination. She called out to Makoto, catching both him and Aniray off guard. The newcomer, Kisaragi, looked up at him with wide, hopeful eyes, claiming she had long desired a chance to speak with him. Her voice trembled slightly, betraying the intensity of her nerves. Because he had no memory of her, Makoto's response was cold and questioning, suspecting another cruel joke. Kisaragi was visibly shaken by his lack of recognition, her shock evident as she insisted on her identity. Looking at her crestfallen face, a memory finally flickered to life in his mind. He realized she was one of the girls who had participated in a fake confession prank against him in the past, though her current expression was one he didn't recognize. She desperately tried to justify her past actions, explaining that the prank had been a forced punishment game and that she had only participated out of fear of being ostracized by her friends. Unmoved by her excuses, Makoto turned to leave, offering a curt farewell. In a final, desperate plea, she begged for a fresh start, confessing that her feelings for him were actually genuine this time. Aniray stood by, a silent witness to the unfolding drama in the school corridor. He felt a surge of dark skepticism as he reflected on her request. To him, the idea of starting over after a cruel prank seemed absurd, especially since he vividly remembered her laughing at his expense back then. He remains silent as Aniray considers the situation, her gaze lowered. She feels the weight of the public setting, unwilling to let this confrontation unfold before their friend. Meanwhile, Kisaragi's voice trembles as she pleads for a chance to apologize. In response to her plea, he delivers a cold reality. It is simply too late for words. The shock registers on her face, a silent gasp escaping her lips before she desperately pivots, asking if he would at least spend the coming weekend with her. Because of his rejection, she throws herself into a deep bow, her voice rising in a desperate cry for forgiveness. He flinches at the sudden intensity, his mind racing with the realization that her apology is hollow, a mere attempt to absolve her own guilt without any regard for the pain she caused him. Her desperate display is cut short as Aniray finally snaps, stepping firmly between the two of them. She places a protective hand on his arm while pushing the other girl back, her patience having reached its absolute limit. She is immediately confronted by a flash of anger from Kisaragi, who demands to know why she is interfering in a private conversation. Aniray doesn't flinch, coldly explaining that they have school responsibilities to attend to and that he has no time to waste on someone like her. The girl is met with a final, sharp command to get lost. He stands by, allowing himself to be led away as the tension in the air reaches a breaking point. Moments later, a flicker of surprise crosses his features as he processes the swiftness of the intervention. He is then called by name as she urges him to leave the scene behind. He offers a quiet affirmation, his footsteps echoing hers as they turn their backs on the past. As they disappear around the corner, the girl who once laughed at him now stands trembling, her face hidden as the weight of her rejection finally sinks in. The hallway soon falls into a heavy stillness, the lockers standing as silent witnesses to the bridge that has finally been burned. Aniray huffs, her face flushed with a mix of lingering irritation and embarrassment as she walks away. She mutters about the dangerous nature of the girl they just left behind, defensive about her own intervention. Turning her frustration toward her companion, she reminds him that his prior engagement with Haruka, chiding him for his perceived weakness and calling him by his nickname, Nianta. He stares down at his open palm, the sensation of her firm grip still tingling against his skin. The air around them seems to shimmer with the weight of the moment, but he quickly shakes off the distraction. With a quiet resolve, he suggests they continue on their way, closing his hand as if to capture the fading warmth. As they walk side by side, he can't help but tease her, remarking that he'll refrain from certain actions just to avoid making her blush again. This immediately sparks a fiery reaction from her. She whirls around, demanding to know what he meant. Her face turns a deep shade of crimson as she defensively asks if he's hoping for her to take his hand once more, her bravado barely masking her flustered state. He stands amidst the bustle of graduation day, the air thick with the bittersweet energy of endings. A classmate approaches, offering congratulations on finishing middle school and inquiring if he intends to join the rest of the class for the celebratory afterparty. Turning towards Shizuka, he offers a polite but clipped congratulations in return. Before she can engage him further, he abruptly excuses himself, his expression unreadable as he chooses to depart alone. As he walks away, his silhouette growing smaller against the bright day, she reaches out a hand in a desperate, silent plea. She calls his name, begging him to wait, but he continues forward without a single backward glance. She watches him disappear, her brow furrowed with a mix of hurt and confusion at his sudden coldness. She tries to reassure herself, noting that since they are headed to the same high school, there will be other opportunities to bridge the growing distance between them. Sometime later, the scene shifts to the lively interior of the delicious kitchen cafe. Amidst the clatter of plates, a conversation begins regarding a recent sighting of Seita-san and Makoto together. Inside the booth, Miyu and Mirai discuss the unexpected pairing. Miyu admits that Shinazuka is undeniably attractive, and seeing such a pretty girl in Makoto's company came as quite a shock to her. The conversation turns to the Yankee girl, who is also present, but Miyu's attention quickly shifts back to Shinazuka's appearance. She expresses a playful, exaggerated jealousy over the girl's flawless, smooth skin. Miyu then leans in, asking Mirai for her honest take on Shinazuka's character. She voices a concern that if unsavory rumors begin to swirl around the mysterious girl, they might inevitably tarnish Makoto's reputation as well. Mirai reflects on her memories of the girl, recalling how Shinazuka was a constant, solitary figure within the classroom, always keeping to herself and remaining detached from the rest of the students. She notes the strange contrast she witnessed. While Shinazuka appeared to be chatting quite cheerfully with Makoto that day, the underlying vibe between them didn't suggest a genuine friendship, leaving the true nature of their bond a mystery. She listens as the conversation turns to rumors of a past connection between Makoto and a girl named Kisaragi. One of her companions recalls seeing Kisaragi searching for him before, though the memory is hazy and was never taken seriously at the time. The focus then shifts to Shinazuka, whom they describe as a princess type, someone who appears plain and quiet at first glance but holds a mysterious and significant popularity among the boys. Considering this, she hums thoughtfully, sensing that the dynamics between Nanako, Kisaragi, and Makoto have become increasingly strained and unusual lately. Suddenly, Shizuka interjects with a bright smile, eager to share that Makoto was uncharacteristically kind to her that very morning. While the others agree, a shadow of doubt lingers in the air regarding why they are even there. With a triumphant gesture, she reveals that he even accepted her homemade kuzumochi, A small victory that leaves her friends blinking in surprise and confusion. Observing this change, she notes that the cold, intimidating wall Makoto usually projects seems to have softened, and she can't help but wonder if Shinazuka's presence is the catalyst for this shift. As they sit together in a quiet booth, the conversation takes a sharp, personal turn when one of the girls asks point-blank if both she and Shizuka harbor romantic feelings for Makoto. The question hangs heavy in the air, causing her to avert her gaze as a deep, painful blush creeps across her face, while Shizuka watches her with a quiet, knowing intensity. This moment of tension triggers a memory for Shizuka, taking her back to a day in grade school when she sat injured while a group of children pointed fingers at Makoto, branding him a villain. She remembers the suffocating atmosphere of that day, the way the accusations flew while she remained silent. Though he had done nothing to hurt her, the words to defend him simply wouldn't come. She reflects on the crushing weight of a child's social world, realizing that for someone like Makoto, being condemned by his peers wasn't just a phase. It defined his entire existence and forged his somber nature. This realization is tinged with guilt as she recalls her own paralyzing fear. She worried that defending him would only turn the tide of hatred toward herself, leaving her to watch him remain trapped in that isolation throughout their middle school years. Haunted by her inaction, she remembers how she would avert her eyes and flee whenever they crossed paths, even as a voice in her head screamed that she should speak up and clear the air. She had hoped that high school would offer a fresh start, a chance to leave the shadows of the past behind, but the reality of life proved far more stubborn than her optimistic wishes. Looking back, she acknowledges this silence as a profound betrayal, a mistake born from her own perceived weakness that she has carried with her ever since. The weight of these memories settles heavily upon her, a silent admission of the truth she has long tried to bury. The memories shift back to a day when the whispers first began to swirl around a young Shizuka, who listened as others recounted how the neighborhood children had targeted Makoto, throwing stones and destroying his belongings. Surrounded by her peers, the young girl was pressed for confirmation. The other children eager to believe that the boy they labeled as scary was truly capable of the dark deeds they whispered about. The gossip grew more cruel as they dissected his family life, labeling him two-faced and weaponizing the fact that Haruka's mother was not his biological parent to further alienate him. As the laughter of the other children echoed, declaring that his loneliness was his own fault, she could only watch in stunned silence, the seeds of a long-lasting regret being sown in that very moment. She stood by the door, a small figure offering a cheerful welcome as Haruka returned from school, the house still filled with the simple warmth of their childhood. Her expression shifted to one of pure shock when she overheard the whispers of Miyu and the others, who claimed that her older brother had physically harmed a girl, a rumor that felt like a sudden, cold wave. When he finally stepped through the front door, his head was bowed in a heavy, silent gloom that seemed to fill the hallway, ignoring the world around him. Looking back now, she realizes her own selfishness. She had been so desperate for his attention, jealous of the time he spent with Shizuka-chan, that she had even resorted to tattling on him to their mother, just to cause him trouble. She had watched him sink deeper into a dark, solitary world as he grew gloomier, foolishly believing that she could simply wait for the right moment to shower him with kindness and fix everything, never realizing how much damage her silence was doing. Now, the weight of that regret is unbearable, as she sees only a stranger in his eyes, a brother who offers nothing but hollow, polite responses, the bond they once shared having withered away completely. Nearby, the conversation turned toward a specific, defining error, as Mirai prepared to address the shadow hanging over their past and the misunderstanding that had defined their middle school years. Shinazuka hesitated, bringing up the persistent rumor that he had once assaulted her, a story that had followed him for years and cemented his reputation as a dangerous outcast. Mirai countered this immediately, explaining that she had known the truth since their middle school graduation and that the incident in the library was not what everyone believed it to be. She finally laid the truth bare. During the chaos of the earthquake, he hadn't been attacking her at all, but had instead thrown himself in harm's way to shield her from the falling shelves, leaving Shinazuka in stunned disbelief. She stood in stunned silence, watching as the other girl walked away, the weight of the apology lingering in the air like a physical burden. She found herself pulled into the past, to the chaotic aftermath of the earthquake, when the library was filled with the poisonous whispers of an alleged assault. The young girl at the center of the storm could only weep, her silence in the face of the crowd's accusations against her savior becoming a shield for her own vulnerability. She watched as the disbelief of their peers curdled into suspicion, the image of the kind-hearted boy they thought they knew shattering under the weight of the rumor. They didn't hesitate to cast stones, their whispers turning into open disgust as they speculated about his motives during the disaster. The boys who had once ignored her now flocked to her side, offering shallow comforts and hollow praise that she found herself unable to reject. She realized then that the sudden influx of attention was a balm for her loneliness, a selfish joy that outweighed the guilt of the lie she was living. She had traded his reputation for a life of popularity and friends, a transformation that felt like a dream she never wanted to wake from. The conversation in the present brought those memories to the surface, as her friend remarked on the legendary popularity she had enjoyed in middle school. The girl's casual observation forced her to finally confront the truth. Her silence wasn't just about social status, but a deep, unrequited love for the boy she had allowed the world to hate. She called out to him desperately, her voice lost in the bustle of the schoolyard. But he had simply continued walking, never once turning back to acknowledge her presence. She realized the magnitude of her mistake in that moment, mourning the missed opportunity of high school and the fresh start she had once hoped for. Nearby, another girl sat with her head bowed and hands tightly clasped, consumed by the crushing weight of her own culpability, yet unable to let go of the deep affection she still felt for him. They shared a heavy sense of remorse as they lamented their hesitation, wishing they had possessed the courage to reach out and offer their apologies before the distance between them became an unbridgeable chasm. They understood that no matter how much they wanted to apologize, he had no reason to believe in them anymore. As they sat together, the younger girls expressed a desperate urge to apologize immediately, but they were forced to admit that he wouldn't even grant them a single glance. She then proposed a more calculated approach, suggesting they focus on actions that would restore his former, kinder nature before attempting any apology. She clarified that they must avoid direct contact for now, a strategy that eventually gave the younger ones a renewed sense of purpose as they vowed to do their best. One of them looked on with a somber expression, acknowledging the harsh reality that they were the ones who had caused his pain and perhaps didn't even deserve to be near him. The group listened as she concluded that words of regret were currently worthless. Until they could prove themselves, they had no right to his love or even to step into his personal space. Shizuka stands up with a burst of energy, her hands on the table as she declares their new mission. Since the Yankee girl has managed to start reclaiming Makoto's heart, she insists they must support her efforts completely. Her sudden outburst leaves Mirai and Miyu momentarily stunned. As the initial shock fades, the three girls settle back into their seats around the table. Miyu nods in agreement, committing herself to cheering for Shinizuka. Mirai adds a somber note, acknowledging that while they cannot erase the mistakes they've made in the past, they can at least try to do what is right now. This shared resolve solidifies into a formal decision. They recognize that Shinizuka has achieved something they couldn't, reaching a small part of Makoto's guarded heart. Together, they vow to take active steps to foster the relationship between the two, promising to provide whatever support is necessary. Moving from sentiment to strategy, they begin to discuss the finer details of their plan. Mirai takes the lead, suggesting that their first priority should be clearing the path of potential obstacles. She specifically identifies Kisaragi and Nanako as individuals who might inadvertently interfere with Makoto and Shinizuka's progress. A brief, heavy silence falls over the table as the weight of their conspiracy sinks in. They look at one another, the unspoken understanding between them growing stronger in the quiet of the cafe. The tension breaks as a collective sense of relief and shared purpose washes over them. Small smiles and light giggles escape as they realize they are no longer alone in their regret, but united in a common goal. To seal their pact, they bring their hands together in the center of the table. Despite the painful circumstances that brought them together, there's a sense of gratitude for this newfound connection. They remind each other that this alliance must remain a strict secret between the three of them. Makoto reflects on a simple gift of kuzumochi from Haruka, which triggers a memory of Shizuka from their childhood. He questions why she still holds onto these small details of his preferences when his own heart has grown so cold and indifferent to the world around him. He watches her from a distance, remembering how they were once inseparable, a constant presence in each other's lives. Yet, despite the familiarity of the past, the present feels hollow. The connection that once defined him has vanished, leaving only a void where his emotions used to be. His gaze then shifts to Mirai, whose pained expression and uncharacteristic kindness only serve to confuse him further. He recalls the quiet solace they found in books together, a time when he could momentarily escape his troubles. But even her warmth fails to penetrate the numbness that has taken hold. Standing alone, he feels the weight of his own fragmentation, a sense of being utterly broken by the world's cruelty. He has reached a point where trust is a foreign concept, and the words of others carry no weight, leaving him adrift in a sea of apathy. The silence is broken by the mechanical slide of a phone screen as Haruka prepares to bridge a long-standing gap. She offers to connect him with his father, a gesture that carries a heavy weight of anticipation and dread for the young man. As they wait for the call to connect, the tension in the room is palpable, a stark contrast to the mundane surroundings of their home. He had doubted his father would even agree to speak, making the impending conversation feel all the more significant and nerve-wracking. With the phone pressed to his ear, he finally finds the strength to speak the words he has been holding back. He informs his father that the novel he poured his soul into is finally going to be published, a milestone he never thought he would share with the man. To his surprise, the voice on the other end is not one of dismissal, but of practical support and unexpected validation. His father acknowledges the reality of the publishing world, warning him of potential scams, and insists on acting as his guardian for the upcoming contracts, a rare moment of paternal protection. He stands frozen as the words sink in, a mixture of shock and relief washing over him. His father's voice crackles through the line, telling him to be proud and declaring him to be his pride and joy, a sentiment that shatters his carefully constructed walls of isolation. In this moment of profound emotional upheaval, his eyes reflect a glimmer of something long thought lost. The weight of his father's approval begins to thaw the icy detachment that had gripped him, hinting at a path toward healing and reconnection. He sits across from the woman, his expression guarded as she addresses him by name. insisting on her request once more. He listens as she explains that her vocation is to bring joy through literature, expressing a sincere desire to share his narrative with the entire world. Hearing this, he looks down, the weight of the proposal causing a flush of heat to rise to his face as she asks for his permission to commit his words to paper. Nearby, his companion fidgets nervously, her own resolve hardening as she silently vows to give her all if his dream of publication becomes a reality. He finally looks up, admitting that while this path might be seen as selfish or potentially disruptive to his family life, he cannot turn away from it. With a sudden burst of conviction, he stands and bows low, his voice trembling as he formally entreats her to transform his manuscript into a published book. In response to his earnest plea, she offers her congratulations, while behind him, his friend is overcome with emotion, her own tears falling as she adds her thanks to the moment. The dam finally breaks, and he is left breathless and weeping, his face buried in his hands as he struggles to express the depth of his gratitude. As he stands there, vulnerable and sobbing, he realizes that the strength to take this monumental step forward only came to him because of the bond they share. Meanwhile, elsewhere, a digital screen captures a fleeting image, a silent witness to the unfolding changes in his life. He returns home under the cover of night, the city lights twinkling behind him as he announces his arrival, finally parting ways with his companions. Upon entering, he is immediately confronted by his stepmother, who questions why he kept such significant news from her, revealing that his father was the one to break the silence. He offers a quiet apology for the delay, explaining that the publishing offer is legitimate and promising that it will not bring any shame or trouble to the household. Desperation colors his voice as he bows deeply before her, begging for this single concession and offering to follow whatever path she chooses for his education and career in return. Remaining in his low bow, he repeats his plea with raw intensity, asking only for the chance to see his work in print. She falters, her expression a mix of confusion and hurt as she struggles to understand why he feels the need to seek her approval in such a formal, distant manner. Attempting to bridge the growing gap, she suggests they celebrate the news with a family dinner, hoping to return to a sense of normalcy. The offer of a celebration is met with a cold, sharp gaze as he finally voices the truth. He kept the secret because he knew her lack of faith in him would only jeopardize his dreams. She stands frozen, the weight of his words stripping away her composure as he declares that she is incapable of ever understanding what he hopes to achieve. The air grows heavy with the ghosts of past betrayals, as he reminds her of the time she refused to listen to his side of the story during his younger years, making it impossible for him to offer her the trust she now seeks. He had laid his heart bare, and the weight of his words left his stepmother trembling. She could only whisper his name, her face etched with the realization that her years of distrust had finally shattered something vital within him. Turning away, the young man offered a hollow apology for the harshness of his truth. He declared that if his presence continued to be a source of friction, he would remove himself from the household entirely, seeking a life elsewhere to avoid further conflict. This declaration sent his stepmother collapsing to the floor in a fit of desperate sobs. She wailed her apologies, finally grasping the depth of the pain she had inflicted, her voice cracking as she begged for forgiveness for pushing him to such an extreme. Seeing the family fracturing, Haruka lunged forward, her own eyes brimming with tears. She pleaded with him to stay, her voice a frantic cry against the thought of their bond being severed by his departure. She confessed that while his peace of mind was paramount, even if it meant him living alone, the thought of losing him was a burden she could hardly bear. Her fists clenched as she struggled with the conflicting desire for his happiness and her own need for his presence. A sudden thought struck her, and she proposed a middle ground, their grandfather's vacant house. She turned her frustration toward her mother, accusing her of suffocating him with her constant, misplaced scrutiny. Reaching out to him, she expressed her immense pride in the person he had become despite everything. She suggested they approach their father together to arrange for him to live at the other property, a sanctuary where he could finally breathe. As their mother remained broken and weeping, Haruka spoke the cold, hard truth to her. She explained that his lack of faith in them was the direct result of their own actions, and that they would simply have to wait and hope for a future where reconciliation might be possible. Standing by the exit, he watched as his sister took charge of the situation. She urged him to go, promising to look after their mother and handle the emotional wreckage left in the wake of his revelation. Watching him depart, she let out a final, tearful wish. She hoped that in his newfound solitude, he would finally find the peace he deserved, free from the shadows of a family that had failed him for so long. She wears a radiant expression, one that her brother has never witnessed before. As he watches her, a flicker of doubt pierces his usual emotional detachment, making him wonder if he is truly as indifferent to the words of others as he believes. He reaches out, placing a gentle hand on her head in a rare gesture of affection. Though he admits he doesn't quite understand his own impulse, he offers a quiet word of thanks, causing her to blush in surprise at the unexpected contact. She vows to send him off with a smile, even as tears well in her eyes and her heart feels the weight of their impending separation. Observing her struggle to remain cheerful despite her pain, he can only imagine the grimace he must be wearing in return. Makoto steps out his front door, the sharp click of the lock echoing in the quiet morning air as he prepares for the day ahead. As he begins his walk, he is suddenly intercepted by Shinizuka, who greets him with a cheerful morning salutation. She nearly slips into a familiar nickname before correcting herself, her eyes narrowing behind a new pair of glasses as she observes that he seems particularly exhausted. He attempts to brush off her concern, mentioning that the chaotic events of the previous day have left him drained and suggesting that he head off to school alone. She is taken aback by his haste, questioning why he is in such a hurry to leave her behind. He warns her that being seen together will only fuel the school's gossip mill and involve her in unwanted rumors. She remains undeterred, arguing that the rumors have already spread so far that a little more company won't make a difference at this point. She simply states her desire to walk with him today, her expression firm and unyielding. Watching her, he can't help but notice how much her current look, with the glasses and ponytail, reminds him of her older sister, Siko. Sensing his intense gaze, she becomes flustered and defensive, loudly proclaiming that she won't be held responsible for him while he questions the sudden appearance of her glasses. The conversation brings back the memory of his departure from home, when his mother handed him the key to his late grandfather's house along with his accumulated savings. In the background, Haruka had watched the exchange, the weight of the transition hanging over their small apartment. His mother had been full of apologies for the sudden change and offered practical advice, urging him to eat well and manage his chores while reminding him that he was always welcome to return if living alone proved too difficult. Returning to the present, he shows the key to Shinizuka, explaining the abrupt nature of his new living arrangement. She looks on with a mix of surprise and genuine envy at his newfound independence. She quickly points out the practical flaws in his plan, noting that he lacks even the most basic necessities like a toothbrush or spare clothes. With a determined look, she offers to join him on a shopping trip to ensure he is properly settled in his new home. She walked beside him as he contemplated the unexpected turn his life had taken, the reality of his new living situation finally sinking in. Breaking his silence, she offered a sympathetic perspective on his family, suggesting that his mother simply needed time to process things while he focused on his writing. Her expression then shifted to one of concern as she questioned whether this move meant he would no longer be frequenting the food court where they often met. He considered the suggestion, admitting to himself that while the food court had been a refuge from his home life, it was often too chaotic and distracting for serious work. To her utter shock, he casually extended an invitation for her to visit his new home whenever she liked, leaving her momentarily speechless and flustered. She stammered in response, her face flushing as she tried to rationalize her reaction, insisting that her inquiry wasn't born out of loneliness. He nodded in agreement, acknowledging that a quiet environment would be ideal for his writing, though his true concern lay in not wanting to leave her isolated. Despite her obvious interest, she hesitated, adjusting her glasses while nervously questioning if her presence would be a burden, especially since they weren't officially friends. He looked away, a faint blush touching his own cheeks as he reaffirmed that their lack of a formal label didn't matter. She was still welcome to come and write. As they approached the school grounds together, he couldn't help but notice the heavy atmosphere and the curious, lingering stares from the other students. He stands in the classroom, observing the girl beside him. She is flustered, her face flushed as she denies the suggestion that her lack of a weird smile is the reason for her current look. He simply notes that the change must be due to the glasses she's wearing today. Despite his efforts to focus, he finds it impossible to read the latest chapter of his manga. The room is thick with the hushed whispers and curious glances of their classmates, all centered on the two of them and the unusual sight of them arriving together. The classroom door swings open as another student arrives, panting and clearly exhausted from her journey. She pauses, her eyes widening as she takes in the sight of the two of them sitting together in the quiet morning light. A knowing smile spreads across her face. She adjusts her own glasses, her expression shifting from exhaustion to a mischievous sort of intrigue as she observes the pair from across the room, sensing a shift in the social dynamic. Another classmate, Mirai, approaches him with a look of mild surprise. She notes that he seems different today, questioning if he's changed his style, though he remains as stoic and unreadable as ever. She continues, remarking on how frequently she has seen the two of them talking lately. To her, they seem like a perfectly matched pair, a comment that causes the girl beside him to stiffen in embarrassment while he offers only a quiet, dismissive response. Suddenly, the energetic girl from before lunges forward, wrapping Mirai in a tight embrace. She teases her friend, expressing relief that Mirai hadn't confessed her feelings, much to the confusion of those watching the sudden outburst. The interruption clearly grates on the girl in glasses, who looks away with a furrowed brow. The newcomer doesn't stop, playfully suggesting that she wants him to heal her scarred heart, since the two of them are clearly busy with their reading. This is the final straw for the girl in glasses. She whirls around, her face contorted with indignation as she demands to know why everyone assumes they are a couple, her voice rising in a defensive and flustered shout. She can only watch in horror as the other girl laughs, comparing her to a tiny, barking dog. The teasing reaches a peak as the rumors of him inviting her to his home are brought up, leaving her completely mortified and shouting in protest. She is whisked away by her classmates, who offer a hasty apology to Makoto for the disruption. Mizuki takes charge, dragging the protesting girl along while promising to look after her, leaving the young writer to his thoughts. Moments later, the two find themselves alone in the quiet school corridor, sharing a heavy silence that lingers between them. Breaking the tension, she suggests they shift their focus to planning the necessities for their new shared space. admitting that her interest in light novels has waned for the time being. He agrees, noting that he still needs to purchase a cup, which leads her to assume he means one for his frequent coffee drinking, only for him to clarify that the vessel is intended for her use. This unexpected consideration catches her off guard, causing a flush to creep across her cheeks as she processes the gesture. As the school day finally draws to a close, he reflects on the strange turn of events while she remains visibly flustered, stammering that while she would be happy to have a cup of her own, the gesture feels significant. Their errand eventually brings them to a bustling shopping center, where they ascend the escalators while he double-checks their list of items. She remains hesitant, questioning the necessity of the purchase by pointing out the existing supplies at the house and reminding him that their arrangement is strictly professional, centered around their writing project. Despite her insistence that they are not friends, she quickly changes the subject, urging him to move faster since they still have a long list of tasks to complete before heading home. He pauses their progress to find a restroom, asking her to wait for a moment, to which she agrees, indicating a spot nearby where she will linger until his return. He had been gone for some time, leaving her alone on a bench in the bustling terminal. She checked her surroundings, wondering if he had somehow managed to get lost in the crowd or if something else had delayed him. Deciding to pass the time, she pulled out her phone to continue the light novel she hadn't finished during lunch. The digital pages offered a brief escape from the public eye. Her solitude was suddenly interrupted by a group of girls who stopped in their tracks, whispering in disbelief as they recognized her. The quiet moment she had found was instantly shattered. They loomed over her, their voices dripping with mock surprise as they questioned why she was there and if she was actually waiting for a friend, a concept they seemed to find laughable given her reputation. She froze, the weight of their judgment pinning her to the seat. The group began to dredge up old memories, taunting her about the embarrassing stories she used to write and how her phone had once been confiscated by Momo. She could only clutch her belongings tighter, her gaze fixed on the floor as the humiliation returned in waves. They continued their assault, mocking her new appearance and assuming that whoever she was waiting for must be just as much a social outcast as she was. Despite her internal plea for them to stop, she found herself unable to fight back against their cruel assumptions. Just as the tension became unbearable, he reappeared, offering a calm apology for his delay. He immediately noticed her distress and reached out to take the heavy shopping bags from her hands, his presence acting as a shield against the girl's stares. A wave of relief washed over her as she looked up at him, her cheeks flushing with a mix of gratitude and lingering embarrassment. She softly suggested that they leave the area and head home, desperate to put distance between themselves and the group. Behind them, the trio of girls stood frozen in shock, their mockery replaced by genuine surprise at the sight of the handsome young man who had come to her side. They whispered among themselves, unable to reconcile the weirdo they knew with the person standing before them. As they began to walk away, one of the girls tried to interject, claiming to be an old acquaintance and attempting to poison his mind with rumors about her past. He simply ignored her, taking more of the load and focusing only on escorting his companion away from the toxic encounter. He remains unmoved as the trio of girls continues their assault, labeling his companion a bad girl who is merely playing with him. They attempt to lure him away with an invitation to karaoke, desperate to separate him from the girl they despise. The young man responds with a piercing, silent glare that momentarily sends a flutter through the group, though they quickly mask their intimidation with more venom. They pivot their mockery to Shinazuka's secret hobby, laughing about a weird light novel she is supposedly writing. He stands his ground firmly beside her, ignoring their shrill insistence that their company is far superior to that of a social outcast. Despite their persistent warnings to stay away from the weirdo and join them instead, his resolve does not flicker. Turning his gaze fully upon them, he delivers a cold, unwavering ultimatum. He will never forgive them if they cause his precious friend any more pain. The weight of his words leaves Shinazuka wide-eyed, her breath catching at the unexpected defense. Without another word, he reaches out and takes her hand, leading her away from the toxic confrontation. The bullies are left frozen in the hallway, their taunts silenced by his decisive rejection and the sight of the two walking away together. As they distance themselves from the crowd, the girl's composure finally breaks, her head bowing as she struggles with her emotions. He notices her trembling and offers a bit of light-hearted teasing, telling her that a Yankee like her shouldn't be seen crying. She quickly protests, hiding her face while her heart races in a chaotic mix of relief and embarrassment. He softens his tone, admitting that even he has been moved to tears before, recalling a time someone threw a rock at him. To further ease her distress, he produces a small box and offers it to her, suggesting she use it to forget the day's unpleasantness. Inside is a mucky mug, a whimsical gift that catches her completely off guard. He explains that he noticed her interest in the cup earlier at the Destiny shop, though he quickly adds a defensive disclaimer that he wasn't watching her every move. She stares at the gift, the realization of his attentiveness sinking in. Clutching the box, she offers a soft, sincere thank you for the gift and for his company throughout the day. He gives a simple, quiet affirmation, the tension of the earlier encounter finally fading into a moment of shared peace. She stands on the escalator, her face a mix of conflicting emotions as she accepts the small gift. He watches her, a bit exasperated by her reaction, and asks if she's going to laugh or cry. In that moment, a realization about his teacher's past advice regarding the nature of trust begins to take hold. Her expression softens into a radiant, genuine smile as she clutches the box to her chest. The weight of his earlier declaration that he would never forgive anyone who made his precious friend cry resonates deeply within her. She realizes that finding someone to trust completely is what truly matters. And if that person is him, she wouldn't even fear betrayal. Teasingly, she points out that he is making a strange face himself. He follows her down the stairs, still processing the shift in their relationship. The lingering question of whether they have truly become friends hangs in the air, but the isolation that once defined her seems to have finally vanished. She is no longer alone. He remains focused on the screen, his fingers tapping rhythmically against the keys as he works. Behind him, his companion sits quietly at the low table, waiting for a break in his concentration. The sharp whistle of the kettle cuts through the silence, prompting him to finally look away from his work. As he turns, she mentions that she hasn't heard anything from her sister lately. He acknowledges this with a distracted nod before suggesting they take a moment to rest and share some coffee. While he prepares the drinks, she reflects on the busy nature of the editorial department, noting their constant search for new illustrators. He simply agrees, understanding the predictable grind of the publishing world, while she wonders aloud if the talks regarding his own work are progressing smoothly. She leans in, her eyes bright with curiosity, as she points out that he will soon be overwhelmed with revisions. She then shifts the conversation, asking for an update on his latest project. He pauses, a look of mild contemplation crossing his face as he considers how to describe his progress. Taking a sip of her drink, she finally gathers the courage to ask for his honest opinion on the romance novel she has been writing. His response is blunt, questioning if her story can even be classified as a romance when it is filled with inexplicable dance numbers and sudden outbursts of violence. She stares back at him, her expression falling into a stunned, silent hurt as his words sink in. Her face flushes a deep crimson as she defensively explains that her lack of personal experience with love makes the subject difficult to grasp. Turning the tables, she loudly demands to know if his own writing contains any actual romance, or if he is just as inexperienced as she is. He stands there, holding his mug, and calmly admits that he has never actually dated anyone himself. This revelation catches her completely off guard, her eyes widening as she realizes they are both merely writing from their own imaginations. Doubting his claim, she eyes him suspiciously and asks if he is certain about his lack of romantic history. He scoffs at the question, firmly asserting that his statement is the absolute truth. She admits that she had always assumed his writing was rooted in personal experience, a misconception that he quickly and loudly corrects. After a brief, awkward silence, she turns her gaze away, attempting to steer the conversation toward a different topic. She lets out a frustrated sigh, her brow furrowing as she questions his lack of preparation for the upcoming school trip. With only 3 days remaining, he remains characteristically indifferent, wondering aloud if any special effort is even necessary for such an excursion. Her annoyance quickly shifts into a whirlwind of tactical enthusiasm as she begins to outline a rigorous strategy. She insists that they must map out the most efficient routes through the park, select the optimal attire for mobility, and ensure they carry only the most practical gear to maximize their time. He watches her with a quiet sense of realization, noting how much genuine fun she seems to be having just by planning the details. She continues her rapid-fire briefing, mentioning the discovery of new popcorn flavors and the critical need to locate the snack wagons as soon as they arrive. She suddenly slams her hands onto the table, leaning in close to emphasize her point with startling intensity. She warns him that if he doesn't approach this with a proper level of seriousness, he won't be able to experience the full magic of Destiny Land. She pulls back, a faint blush creeping on her cheeks as she admits her relief that they are in the same group, allowing her to handle the logistics for him. He offers a small, supportive smile, assuring her that they will indeed have a good time together. Her dedication to the plan follows them into the school day, where she remains glued to her phone screen. She is currently fixated on the schedule for Mucky's house, determined not to miss a single attraction during their visit. He observes her as they walk through the crowded hallway, struck by the sheer radiance of her expression. It occurs to him that this is the first time he has ever seen her looking so genuinely happy and full of life. She breaks his train of thought by thrusting her phone directly into his line of sight, her excitement bubbling over once more. She points out the seasonal menu options, seeking his agreement on where they should have their lunch, while he marvels at the depth of her passion for the theme park. She looks down at the screen with a soft, expectant gaze, her voice quiet as she reiterates how much she is looking forward to the trip. He responds with a sincere word of thanks, acknowledging all the effort she is putting into making the day special for both of them. Nearby, a group of their classmates stands in the corridor, their conversation hushed as they watch the interaction. One girl in particular, Miyu, looks back over her shoulder with a sharp, calculating gaze, her eyes lingering on the pair with an intensity that suggests she is noticing a significant change in their dynamic. She overhears her companions discussing the legendary beauty of Makoto's childhood friend, Shizuka. The comparison is sharp and unkind, as they point out how Miyu lacks that same ethereal charm. She stares down at her phone, her face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and self-deprecation as she denies their claims, privately agreeing that Shizuka's beauty is on another level entirely. Suddenly, she snaps her head up, her eyes wide with a startled realization. Meanwhile, Makoto's thoughts drift back to a specific memory, a moment that changed the trajectory of their shared project. In the quiet of the classroom, she had approached him with a nervous request, her voice hushed as she asked him to be the first to read her latest attempt at a romance novel before she dared to make it public. As they walked together later, she playfully scolded him for treating her like some kind of romance expert, while he privately mused that the genre seemed catastrophically unfitting for her personality. Nevertheless, they agreed to review the draft at his home after school. Seated at his table, he looked over the pages and bluntly informed her that the story lacked the feel of a true romance, warning her that it would be better if she didn't publish such works under the Niente pen name. She reacted with a mix of confusion and disappointment, questioning if her action-oriented ending was a mistake, while he explained that it felt more like a prologue to a fantasy epic than a romantic conclusion. He looked at her, admitting that while the story is relatable and well-written, the raw emotion within the pages makes him feel strangely self-conscious. She looked away, struggling to find the right words before confessing that despite the embarrassment of finishing it, the process of creation brought her a genuine sense of joy. She had just finished sharing her work, a tale of a hero and heroine, both betrayed and cast out, who find solace in one another. It was a narrative that felt unexpectedly grounded and relatable, and she expressed her relief that he found it so easy to connect with. As the weight of the story settled, he was struck by a sudden, jarring realization. He wondered if he had been unconsciously projecting his own life and his relationship with her onto the fictional outcasts. Overwhelmed by a sudden wave of self-consciousness, she declared that she wasn't cut out for romance and moved to delete the entire draft. He immediately protested, shocked by her sudden decision and urging her not to discard everything she had worked for. He continued to offer his support, insisting that the story was genuinely interesting and that she simply needed to treat it as a creative outlet rather than a burden. He reiterated how much he truly sympathized with the characters she had created. With a newfound sense of purpose, he promised to help her nurture and develop the narrative further. She looked up at him, her initial doubt replaced by a quiet acceptance as she agreed to continue. The ticking of the clock eventually broke their focus, revealing that the evening had slipped away. She realized it was time to head home, both of them surprised by how quickly the hours had passed in each other's company. Sensing the end of their session, he tentatively suggested they share a meal before parting. She admitted she hadn't prepared anything for dinner and had planned on a simple stop at a convenience store on her way home. She mentioned that her sister actually encouraged her to stay and finish her work, but she remained hesitant, not wanting to impose on him. Before she could finish her thought, he cut her off with a loud, impulsive shout, refusing to let the evening end just yet. His face flushed with heat as he reminded her of their upcoming trip, suggesting they turn their dinner into a small celebration to mark the occasion. Caught off guard by his intensity, her own face turned a deep shade of crimson. With a determined look in her eyes, she agreed to the plan, her heart racing at the prospect of their shared evening. She struggles with the knife, hacking at the vegetables with a clumsy, forceful rhythm that leaves the cutting board in a state of disarray. Watching from the side, he can't help but feel a surge of anxiety at her reckless technique. He watches her intently, fearing she might slip and injure herself if she continues at this frantic pace. Sensing his gaze, she suddenly remembers the table needs wiping and asks him to handle it. She then turns back to the counter with renewed determination, insisting that her previous effort wasn't her best and promising to handle the next vegetable with much more precision. While she refocuses on her task, he reminds her of the importance of maintaining a clean environment before they sit down to eat. She acknowledges his point with a quick, distracted agreement, her mind clearly still on the culinary challenge ahead. Despite the chaotic preparation, the final result is a steaming plate of curry and rice, accompanied by a fresh side salad. The presentation is surprisingly appetizing, drawing an enthusiastic exclamation of approval as the meal is finally served. As they begin to eat, he watches her closely, curious to see her reaction to the meal they prepared together. She takes a careful first bite, her expression unreadable for a fleeting moment. A look of pure delight soon washes over her face, confirming that the effort was well worth it. Seeing her enjoy the food, so much allows him to finally relax, a small sense of shared accomplishment settling between them. They settle into a comfortable silence, sitting across from one another as they finish their dinner. The atmosphere in the room has shifted from the frantic energy of the kitchen to a quiet, domestic calm. After the meal, he pulls out a set of detailed notes and a guidebook for their upcoming trip, urging her to at least commit the park map to memory. She, however, is more focused on the excitement of the visit itself, telling him to stop worrying about the logistics and instead look forward to the fun they'll have at Destinyland tomorrow. While she takes over the task of washing the dishes, he remains nearby, his eyes fixed on her every move. Given her earlier display of catastrophic cooking skills, he can't help but worry that the plates might not survive the cleaning process, or worse, that she might somehow hurt herself even now. He eventually returns his focus to the guidebook, flipping through the pages with a mix of anticipation and concern. He wonders aloud about the potential length of the queue times for the popular rides, and expresses a quiet hope that they'll be able to secure a good vantage point for the parade. He watches as she clutches a cushion to her chest, her face flushed with a deep, unmistakable radiance. Her eyes sparkle with an intensity that betrays her restlessness, as she confesses that the sheer anticipation for the coming day might keep her awake all through the night. In response to her overflowing energy, he offers a calm reminder that a lack of rest will only dampen the joy of their excursion. She stammers a quick agreement, clutching a plate as a wave of self-consciousness washes over her. Amidst this quiet domesticity, a realization takes hold. This simple, shared happiness is the very essence of what it means to be friends. Around that time, during his middle school field trip, he found himself adrift in a sea of classmates, yet utterly alone. While others shared laughter and stories, he remained a silent observer, disconnected from the collective joy of the group. This social exile persisted even during the bus rides. The seat beside him remained empty, or was occupied by someone who chose to ignore his presence entirely. For him, these trips were not milestones of friendship, but merely endurance tests of his own invisibility. The chill of those memories faded as he glanced at his phone, the screen displaying 6:30 in the morning. He walked down the residential street, the quiet air of the early hour matching his own calm demeanor as he prepared for the day ahead. At a nearby house, the atmosphere was far more vibrant as a young woman prepared to depart, promising her mother a souvenir from their upcoming trip. Her mother watched with a gentle, knowing expression, noting the uncharacteristic spark of excitement in her daughter's eyes. She caught sight of him then, her initial excitement quickly masked by a practiced indifference as she insisted she wasn't actually that excited. Her sudden shift in tone was transparent, a thin veil over her genuine anticipation for their meeting. He offered a simple greeting, noting that he might have arrived a bit too early for their scheduled departure. His sudden appearance startled her, causing her to jump slightly as she struggled to maintain her cool facade in front of her home. Observing the exchange from the doorway, her mother couldn't help but wear a knowing smile, which only added to the girl's growing fluster. Desperate to escape the scrutiny, the daughter suggested they head toward the station immediately to look around. The young man bowed politely, introducing himself as a friend named Shinju. His formal manners did little to ease her embarrassment, especially as her mother continued to beam at them, clearly enjoying her daughter's discomfort. The woman warmly returned the greeting, revealing that his name was already a familiar one in their household thanks to both Anri and her sister, Siko. The revelation sent a wave of mortification through the girl, who pleaded for her mother to stop before she died of shame. Unable to bear another moment of her mother's teasing, she grabbed his arm and hurried away, urging him to start moving. As they departed, the mother waved a cheerful goodbye, wishing them a wonderful time on their outing together. She stands before him in casual attire, a stark contrast to the school uniform he is accustomed to seeing. He finds himself momentarily breathless, noting how she seems like an entirely different person when she dresses up. He manages a quiet greeting, his eyes lingering on her unfamiliar silhouette. As they begin their walk together along the quiet residential street, a comfortable distance remains between them. The morning sun casts long shadows against the fence as they make their way toward their destination. Breaking the silence, he gestures vaguely toward her clothes, his voice trailing off as he searches for the right words. She stops and turns, her expression a mix of curiosity and sudden self-consciousness. Leaning in slightly, he whispers that the outfit fits her perfectly and that she looks incredibly cute. She flushes, her composure momentarily shattered, before she quickly recovers and insists that she simply took the time to dress appropriately for the day's events. Despite her attempt at a cool exterior, her cheeks burn with a deep, unmistakable crimson. The weight of his sincere compliment lingers, leaving her heart racing in the quiet of the morning. By the time they reach the bustling city center, the tension has eased into a light-hearted banter. She laughs, teasing him for his earlier mumbling, while he tries to dismiss his own embarrassment, both of them resolving to make the most of the trip ahead. The journey continues aboard the train, where their shared passion for light novels makes the minutes fly by unnoticed. Before they know it, the announcement rings out that they have arrived at Kaihama Station. Stepping onto the platform, she takes the lead, suggesting they head toward a nearby shop to kill time. She checks the schedule, noting they have a window of freedom before they are required to meet the rest of the group at the designated parking area. Their stroll eventually brings them face-to-face with their teacher, who is already waiting at the rendezvous point. He offers a polite morning greeting, his expression neutral as he transitions back into his role as a student. The educator acknowledges them with a steady gaze, her arms crossed as she observes their arrival. She returns their greeting, commenting with a hint of knowing observation on how well the two of them seem to be getting along. She watches as the two students confirm their bond, Makoto and Anri both agreeing that they have indeed become friends. Satisfied with their answer, she waves a hand dismissively as she walks away, encouraging them to make as many enjoyable memories as they can during the trip. Once they are alone, she admits that she never expected to be friends with someone like him, though he quickly counters that he felt the same about her and her unsettlingly fake smile. They trade playful insults, with her calling him a scary-eyed delinquent while he remains unfazed by her teasing. He looks away, confessing that even now, he finds it difficult to truly trust anyone, before immediately trying to retract the statement, as if realizing it might have been too harsh. The weight of his past experiences still lingers, making it hard for him to fully lower his guard even in a moment of friendship. Despite his lingering doubts about people in general, he He clarifies that he has no intention of betraying the friends he has made, a sentiment that hangs heavy in the air between them. He explains that while unconditional trust is a bridge too far, his loyalty to those he considers friends is absolute. They share a quiet moment of mutual understanding, with him silently acknowledging that perhaps, when it comes to her, things might be different. To break the growing tension, he points out a nearby shop dedicated to a character named Mucky, suggesting they head over there to escape the sudden embarrassment of their shared vulnerability. She immediately perks up, indignantly correcting his assumption that the mascot is a mouse, insisting with great passion that Mucky is actually a chinchilla. Her defensive stance and intense expression show just how much she cares about the details of her favorite mascot. As they discuss the rarity of the mascot, she becomes determined to find the character in the park, while he simply watches her newfound enthusiasm with a mix of curiosity and amusement. She vows to get a photo with the elusive creature, her previous embarrassment replaced by a singular focus on the task at hand. With a deep blush creeping across her face, she holds up her phone and shyly suggests that, since they are already together, they should take a photo of themselves instead. The request hangs in the air, a bold step toward a more personal connection. She stands before a display window where a Mucky mascot sits amidst balloons, a sign reminding visitors that memories captured in photos will one day resurface in the heart. Turning to her companion, she suggests they use both of their smartphones to capture the moment, while he clears his throat, wondering aloud whose device would be best for the task. She begins fumbling with the settings, searching for the front-facing camera mode to ensure they are both properly framed. With a determined look, she raises her phone, the back of which is adorned with a small Mucky sticker, and prepares to take the shot. Realizing the distance between them, she insists that he move closer, explaining that they won't both fit in the picture otherwise, leaving him to question if such proximity is truly necessary. She doesn't wait for an answer, reaching out to pull him into the frame until their shoulders touch, her face lighting up with a mix of excitement and nerves. As they stare into the screen, the reflection shows two flushed faces. She admits that this is her first time taking a photo like this, her voice trembling slightly with the admission. He counters that it is a first for him as well, and as they bicker over their awkward expressions, he finally announces that he is starting the timer. They freeze in place, the air between them thick with a newfound tension as they wait for the shutter to click, their bodies pressed together in the cramped space. The flash captures the moment, and as they pull apart to inspect the result, they both realize just how stiff and tense they appear in the digital memory. He offers a quiet affirmation as they both gaze at the screen, the digital image capturing a moment of shared vulnerability. Beside him, she reflects on the significance of the event, noting that this first photograph marks a new chapter in their history, a tangible page of memories they have finally created together. She suddenly bursts with newfound energy, lifting her phone high and declaring her intent to fill the day with countless more snapshots. Caught off guard by her sudden enthusiasm, he can only follow behind, softly pleading for her to go easy on him as they embark on this unexpected journey through the day. The grand spires of Destiny Land rise against the sky, a kingdom of fantasy waiting for the students to enter. Amidst the bustling crowd, Makoto senses a shift in his companion's mood. He turns to Shinazuka, noticing her distant gaze, and asks if something is bothering her. He wonders aloud if her somber mood is due to the latest chapter he posted that morning. She quickly dismisses the thought, though her expression remains clouded as they stand together in the queue. He reminds her that the day is meant for enjoyment, but she admits that the high-energy atmosphere of the park isn't quite her style. Despite her initial hesitation, she looks at him and offers a gentle, genuine smile, finding comfort in his presence. She confesses that she would have preferred visiting the park at a time when it wasn't teeming with her fellow students. He pulls out his phone to check for any updates from their teacher, while she watches him with a curious, quiet intensity. Their private moment is interrupted by the arrival of other students, who cheerily greet the morning. One of them brings up a rising author named Paguko, asking if they've noticed the name climbing the rankings lately. The group gathers as their teacher begins the morning briefing, explaining that this is a formal school event and they're expected to remain until 4 p.m. She concludes her instructions with a warning not to get too carried away, reminding them they can either re-enter the park later or head straight home once the event concludes. As the crowd begins to move, Shinazuka reaches back, her hand outstretched as she urges him to keep up so they don't get left behind. In her haste, her foot catches on the pavement, and she stumbles forward with a startled cry. She's caught instantly by Makoto, who steadies her before she can fall. Flushed with embarrassment, she quickly regains her footing, while he gently reminds her to watch her step amidst the excitement. Standing before the towering, ornate spires of the theme park's central castle, she can hardly contain her enthusiasm, declaring their intent to go all out and conquer every attraction. He, ever the voice of reason, suggests they prioritize securing a fast-track pass to navigate the growing lines efficiently, though she remains fixated on the sheer scale of the park. Their planning is suddenly interrupted when a round, costumed mascot wanders into view nearby. Her attention shifts instantly from the schedule to her phone, her eyes widening as she recognizes the character. She becomes a whirlwind of indecision, her face heating up as she stammers about wanting a photo with the famous mascot, Taki, while simultaneously worrying that they might miss out on the priority passes if they delay. The internal struggle between her desire for a souvenir and her need for efficiency leaves her visibly flustered. Seeing her conflict, Makoto offers a reassuring perspective, noting that while sticking to a schedule has its merits, embracing the spontaneous joy of the moment is just as vital. He points out that following their feelings is important too, and his words clearly resonate, easing her frantic state and helping her decide. Moments later, the two of them stand beside the silent, furry mascot for a commemorative photo. Though he remains somewhat reserved, she beams with a bright, genuine smile as the digital memory is captured. The day continues in a blur of motion as they plummet down the steep drops of a roller coaster. While she throws her hands up in pure exhilaration, the intense G-forces leave him looking noticeably pale and unsteady. To recover from the adrenaline, they find a quiet bench to share some snacks. They sit side by side, each enjoying a long, sugar-dusted chuo as the frantic energy of the park hums in the distance. As she takes a bite, a look of pure, unadulterated happiness washes over her face. In this quiet moment, the crowds and the chaos seem to vanish, replaced by the simple delight of the day. They stop at a stall selling themed headbands, where Shinizuka excitedly points out the barriered accessories. Makoto hesitates, feeling the weight of social embarrassment, but she insists that everyone in the park is wearing them and that he will look fine. Despite his reservations, he relents and dons the headband, though he mutters about the absurdity of the situation. He never imagined he would be seen in such a thing, while she beams, assuring him it fits his look perfectly. She then reaches for a pair of long, white bunny ears, placing them atop her own head with a playful flourish. Twirling around to show off the full effect, she asks for his honest opinion on her new look. He finds himself momentarily breathless, eventually stammering out that she looks exactly like the character she is imitating. Noticing the sudden warmth in his cheeks, she playfully accuses him of blushing. He quickly turns away, denying the charge with a huff, while she giggles and heads toward the counter to finalize their purchase. As they continue their stroll through the park, her attention is suddenly caught by a small figure standing solitary against a wall. She expresses immediate concern for the young girl, prompting him to follow her gaze toward the child. The child stands trembling, her eyes brimming with unshed tears as she looks around the bustling crowd with a sense of profound isolation. Sensing the girl's distress, she tells him that she needs to check on her, noting that the child seems far from enjoying the festivities. He nods in silent agreement, stepping back to let her take the lead. She approaches the girl gently, but the child flinches, her expression shifting from sorrow to a guarded, almost hostile suspicion as she demands to know what they want. With a soft, reassuring tone, she asks if the girl has become separated from her companions and offers their assistance in finding them. However, the girl's response is immediate and cold, a sharp refusal that hangs in the air between them. She watches silently as a group of students in identical uniforms disappears into the crowd, leaving the young girl behind in their wake. Beside Makoto, she notices the girl's expression crumble as the group vanishes, a silent realization of abandonment crossing the child's face. The girl suddenly bristles, clutching her backpack tightly to her chest as she stammers a denial, insisting with a blush that she hasn't been separated from anyone. Despite the girl's sharp demand to be spared any pity, she remains composed, her gaze steady and non-judgmental as she observes the child's distress. She gently bridges the gap by introducing herself and Makoto, explaining their presence at the park for a school trip before softly asking for the girl's name. A long silence follows as the girl looks away, but she maintains a warm, patient smile, waiting for the tension to ebb. Finally, the girl mutters her name, Chisa Hayuzuki, a third-year middle schooler, before immediately retreating back in her shell and demanding to be left alone. When she tentatively asks if the girl's companions had perhaps abandoned her, Chisa snaps back with a defensive roar, claiming it was none of their business. The girl's anger boils over as she huddles over her bag, cursing the uselessness and jealousy of those she had been with, her small frame trembling with resentment. Before the girl can spiral further into her bitterness, she reaches out and firmly settles the white bunny ear headband on Chisa's head, catching her completely off guard. She stood there, frozen in shock as the white bunny ears sat atop her head. Shinizuka giggled, complimenting how well they suited her, though she couldn't help but add that they weren't quite as cute as when she wore them herself. Turning to Makoto, she sought his agreement, while the young girl could only stammer in confusion. Reacting to the teasing, she snatched the headband off and threw it down, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. She shouted for them to leave her alone, her voice cracking as she warned them not to make fun of her, clearly on the verge of another outburst of tears. Leaving her to her thoughts for a moment, the grand spires of the theme park loomed in the background as Makoto calmly suggested they at least go grab some tea. Shinizuka readily agreed, noting that spending one's time crying in a place like Destiny was a terrible waste of a day. As they watched her, she looked down at the bottle in her hands, her earlier hostility softening into a quiet, almost whispered thank you. Her new acquaintance watched her closely, the silence between them momentarily peaceful. As she sat in silence, the moment of calm was broken when her companion checked the time, realizing how late it had become. Just then, a loud, unmistakable growl erupted from the younger girl's stomach, causing her to blush deeply in shame. Seizing the opportunity, she reached out and firmly grasped the girl's arm, pulling her forward with sudden energy. The younger girl let out a startled cry as she was yanked from her seat, the sudden movement catching her completely off guard. While being dragged by her, she frantically asked where they were being taken. The older girl, her expression determined and a slight blush on her own cheeks, declared that they were all going to have lunch together, leaving no room for argument. Watching her lead the way, he followed behind at a slower pace, carrying his bag. He couldn't help but think to himself that the girl really needed to work on her social graces, as her invitations felt more like a kidnapping. Makoto stares at his phone, the screen confirming his fears. He has been blocked. He questions his own decision to show up, feeling out of place as he stands near the water with his companions. Noticing the silence, Shinazuka points out a small plushie attached to Chisa's bag, asking if it's what she thinks it is. Chisa immediately becomes defensive, clutching the charm and insisting it is her precious familiar, warning the other girl not to mock the series it comes from. She recalls seeing the younger girl alone on the bus before, never speaking to a soul. She notes how lonely the girl always seemed, a sentiment that causes the group to pause in reflection. This observation triggers a wave of bitter memories for Makoto. He remembers the crushing weight of being ignored by his peers despite his apologies. He thinks back to how a single mistake with a popular girl turned the entire class against him, and how his attempt to be a hero only resulted in him being branded a criminal. Chisa begins to open up as well, her voice trembling as she describes how a former friend betrayed her secrets, making her the target of ridicule. She confesses that even her own family began to view her as a burden, until she reached a point where she could no longer even find the strength to cry. She explains her deep connection to the story of a mistreated hero who finds strength through a journey with his familiar. She admits that while she cannot help the hero herself, the story provides a much-needed comfort to her heart. Sensing a shared passion, Shinazuka eagerly asks if she has any other favorite series. Chisa's eyes light up as she mentions a dark isekai title, and the two begin to bond over their mutual love for niche stories. He watches them, surprised by the sudden shift in atmosphere and the ease with which they discuss the things they love. Chisa then turns the question on him, asking which character he prefers, leaving him momentarily speechless. Suddenly overwhelmed by her own openness, Chisa buries her face in her hands, mortified that she might have said too much. She admits she was genuinely excited for the day, prompting Shinazuka to warmly invite her to spend the rest of the afternoon with them. She hesitates, teasingly suggesting she doesn't want to intrude on what looks like a date. While Shinazuka reacts with flustered surprise, the younger girl insists on finding a quiet place to write, leaving the two of them to continue their walk alone. She watches them with a playful glint in her eyes, teasingly suggesting that their wandering together constitutes a date. Makoto immediately recoils, his face flushing as he insists it is merely a school trip, while Shinazuka, ever the diplomat, invites the younger girl to join their group. Because of this invitation, the conversation shifts, and the girl's eyes widen in sheer disbelief when Makoto casually mentions the name Paguko. She stammers, her face turning a bright shade of crimson as she wonders how he could possibly know about the niche author she follows so closely. He explains calmly that he noticed a specific plush toy on her bag and overheard her mention writing earlier in the day. Though she initially winces, expecting ridicule, she finds a strange comfort in the fact that he isn't laughing at her interests. Seeing her hesitation, Shinazuka leans in with a reassuring smile, vouching for Makoto's character and suggesting they all set off on a mission to find the elusive Mucky Paguko together. The group's mood lightens instantly as they prepare to hunt for the mascot. The hours that follow are a blur of excitement, filled with the towering heights of the Ferris wheel and a flurry of digital memories captured on their phones. As the sun begins to set, the younger girl realizes with a hint of melancholy that while they never found the specific item they sought, the day is already drawing to a close. Upon reaching the designated meeting spot, Makoto turns to her with a protective air, instructing her to head straight home. He searches for the right words of encouragement, wanting to say something meaningful but finding it difficult to express the simple sentiment of cheer up. While he struggles with his words, Shinazuka gazes at the group, realizing that a profound bond has formed between three people who once felt they could never trust anyone. Makoto finally speaks, promising that this isn't a final farewell and that they will return to this place together. She beams at them, her previous sadness replaced by a bright smile as she promises to see them again soon. Shinazuka waves enthusiastically, shouting that she will send a message later as the younger girl begins her journey home. As the bus carries her away, she sits quietly, reflecting on the day until a notification pings on her phone. Curiosity piqued, she opens a message box on a familiar website, her eyes scanning the new activity. The realization hits her like a physical shock when she sees the usernames Nianta and Pamiko appearing in the inbox of the novel site. She stares at the screen, breathless, as she connects the dots and realizes that her new friends are the very creators she admires, filling her with a newfound sense of courage and wonder. The school field trip draws to a close as the teacher dismisses the group, offering a final warning not to linger too late in the park. Makoto and Shinazuka stand among their peers, the energy of the day beginning to settle into a quiet evening. As they begin to walk away from the crowd, he finds his thoughts drifting toward Chisa, wondering how she is managing. Breaking the silence, he turns to his companion and firmly declares that they will not leave until they have successfully found the elusive mascot, Mucky. She agrees enthusiastically, suggesting they capture a photo of the creature to share with Chisa later. However, the mystery of the mascot's sudden disappearance during the parade puzzles her, leading her to question if the character possesses some sort of supernatural ability to vanish at will. Despite the confusion surrounding the mascot, he acknowledges how much she had been looking forward to this moment. Adorned with a pair of decorative bunny ears, she looks back at him, her disappointment over the missed encounter softened by his steady presence. Blushing slightly, she proposes a change of plans, suggesting they take a leisurely stroll through the park to watch the fireworks and the parade together before heading home. He is momentarily caught off guard by her forwardness, watching as she waits for his response with a mix of hope and nervousness. They move deeper into the festive grounds, the castle looming in the distance. He reflects on the deliberate pace of their relationship, deciding that as long as she is comfortable with how things are progressing, he has no reason to complain. Their quiet walk is interrupted by a notification on her phone, and she excitedly reveals a message from Chisa, who has already managed to make a new friend on the bus. Hearing this, he is struck by a profound sense of gratitude. He realizes that if he hadn't found the courage to write his novels, he never would have crossed paths with her or experienced this life-changing connection. He watches her, the realization dawning that a school life without her is now completely inconceivable. He concludes that even if they hadn't shared the bond of his writing, their paths were destined to intertwine simply because of his overwhelming desire to be near her. Caught in the sincerity of his own thoughts, he speaks aloud, telling her that having her by his side is more than enough. When she questions his meaning, he clarifies with unwavering honesty. To him, she is truly special. The weight of the confession hangs in the air, leaving her visibly stunned. She quickly hides her burning face behind her hands, overwhelmed by the directness of his affection. He can't help but let out a soft, embarrassed laugh, the two of them sharing a moment of vulnerable, heartfelt intimacy as the evening festivities continue around them. He watches as she suddenly spots something in the distance, her eyes lighting up with excitement. She points toward a castle, urging him to hurry so they don't lose sight of the elusive Mucky Eye mascot. As they plunge into the dense crowd, she expresses concern about being separated in the sea of people. Without a word, he reaches out and firmly grasps her hand, ensuring they stay together amidst the chaos. They continue their walk hand in hand, the initial tension of the crowd fading into a comfortable silence. She remarks on how much fun she's had today, and he quietly admits that this experience was a first for him as well, reflecting on how he once only trusted himself. Suddenly, the night sky erupts in a brilliant display of fireworks, casting a warm glow over the park. In this moment of shared wonder, he realizes that he has finally found someone he can truly trust. He feels a strange warmth welling up in his chest, a sensation he thought he had lost long ago. Turning to her, he speaks from the heart, telling her that she has become a truly special and precious person to him. Taking a bold step forward, he asks if he might call her by her first name, Aniray. She blushes deeply, her heart racing, and shyly agrees while asking if she can call him Shinkuin in return. Their intimate moment is interrupted by the sudden reappearance of Mucky Eye, prompting them to chase after the mascot together. As they run, they exchange heartfelt thanks, both realizing that this is just the beginning of their journey side by side. Makoto gazes at the small rabbit charm dangling from his school bag, a quiet symbol of the bond he shares with Aniray. He looks composed, ready to face the day with this small token of their shared memories close at hand. The bag sits prepared on a chair as the morning light begins to wash over the quiet residential neighborhood. Outside, the houses stand still under the pale sky, marking the start of another ordinary school morning. Inside the Shinazuka household, Aniray is a whirlwind of morning energy, shouting her resolve to do her best today. Her enthusiasm is quickly dampened when her mother calls out her name with embarrassing volume, causing the girl to cringe and plead for her to be quieter, knowing Makoto is waiting just outside. He greets her calmly as she steps out, using her first name with a familiarity that makes her heart skip. She responds by calling him by his surname, her cheeks flushing pink as her mother watches the exchange from the doorway with an amused, knowing smile. The older woman fussily adjusts her daughter's ribbon, teasing her for being so restless before turning her attention to the young man. She warmly invites him to come over for dinner sometime, a gesture that leaves the girl mortified as they finally manage to make their escape towards school. As they walk, she lets out a heavy sigh, explaining that her mother is eager to have a proper chat with him. He is surprised by the request, but she is certain it is merely a ploy for her mother to find new ways to tease him. Amidst the conversation, a specific detail from their earlier interaction strikes him as odd. He asks why she always reverts to calling him Shinju whenever her mother is around. The question catches her completely off guard, and through a deep, radiant blush, she confesses that using his given name in front of her family is simply too embarrassing for her to handle. Their conversation shifts to the upcoming weekend and their planned visit to her sister's office. Since her sister will be busy working, he offers to meet her at her home first, which prompts her to suggest they go to karaoke together afterward. We take a moment to consider the invitation, as karaoke is an experience he hasn't explored much. After a brief, thoughtful pause, he agrees, admitting that he would actually like to give it a try. Her face beams with excitement at his acceptance, her eyes sparkling with joy. She then wonders if they should invite Chisa to join them, and he agrees that reaching out to the younger girl would be a good idea, solidifying their plans for the weekend. The school day draws to a close, the building standing quiet under the soft glow of the afternoon sun. She is the topic of hushed whispers in the hallway, as Makoto overhears his classmates remarking on how much softer and more approachable she has become lately. He feels a sharp, inexplicable pang of irritation, questioning if his feelings for her have transcended the boundaries of mere friendship. Noticing his distant gaze, she leans in to check on him, her presence pulling him back to reality. He quickly dismisses his internal turmoil, fearing that admitting to such feelings would only bring her unnecessary trouble, and agrees when she suggests it is time to head home. Their departure is interrupted when a group of girls suddenly swarms her, playfully dragging her away to walk with them instead. Left standing alone in the corridor, he offers a quiet farewell as she is whisked away by her friends. On another walk together, a heavy silence hangs between them until she finally speaks up, asking if he was once close with Saito-san. He catches this subtle shift in her expression, wondering what prompted the sudden inquiry into his past acquaintances. As they continue their trek, she asks if he intends to reconcile with the other girl, but he stops her mid-thought. He speaks with quiet conviction, assuring her that she is the only person who truly matters to him. His words leave her momentarily stunned, her face flushing as she admits that her feelings mirror his own. The air between them grows thick with a new, shared understanding, as she hurriedly suggests they keep moving toward home to hide her embarrassment. Later, the conversation takes a more somber turn as she confesses a long-held secret, a deep-seated fear of men that has haunted her since childhood. She recalls a boy named Nikaido, a childhood friend whose constant, aggressive attention left her feeling cornered and uneasy. She explains that while he was rough and she disliked his company, his persistence led their peers to believe they were a couple, even labeling him as her fiancé. This unwanted association only served to isolate her further, as the other girls in her class kept their distance. Seeing the pain in her eyes as she recounts the isolation she felt, he gently tells her that she doesn't need to force herself to say any more. In response, she reaches out, asking him to take her hand as if seeking an anchor in the present. She reflects on her past trauma, noting that her hands used to shake uncontrollably whenever those memories surfaced. The only respite she found was in her writing or during their time together at the food court. However, she reveals with a gentle smile that since the night he held her hand during the fireworks, that trembling has completely vanished. Because of the peace he brought her, she reaches out to embrace him from behind, resting her head against his back. She whispers that since he healed her heart, it is now her turn to heal his. He stands frozen, his face flushing a deep crimson as he feels the warmth of her touch and the sincerity of her words. As they hold each other, her mind drifts through a litany of simple, lost desires, playing soccer with others, going on school trips, or sharing happy meals with a family. Amidst all those mundane wishes, she realizes that what she truly craved above all else was the simple, profound comfort of someone holding her close. The weight of her confession breaks through his defenses, and he finally admits to himself that he has been running away from his own feelings. With tears welling in his eyes, he confesses that he can no longer lie to himself about how much she means to him. She looks up at him with unwavering kindness, promising to always be there by his side. Looking directly into her eyes, he declares his love, naming her as the person he cherishes most in the entire world. The suddenness of the confession leaves her momentarily stunned, her eyes wide with surprise. He offers a genuine, relieved smile, joking that with these true feelings finally out in the open, he feels he can finally write a romance novel worth reading. Makoto and Anri stand before a towering skyscraper. He is awestruck, viewing this massive structure as the threshold of his professional aspirations. As they walk along the busy street, she remarks on the prestige of the company where her sister is employed. He admits that while the publisher's name was familiar, the sheer scale of the headquarters is daunting. She shares that she felt a similar shock during her own initial visit. She urges him to face the upcoming meeting with confidence, emphasizing the importance of the day. He nods, though his expression betrays a lingering sense of anxiety. She prepares herself for the reception desk, determined to speak clearly and not falter. He questions her readiness, wondering if she might freeze up under the pressure of the environment. While she remains focused, he reflects on his decision to bring her along, briefly wondering if her sister would have been a more practical choice. She senses his doubt and reassures him of her competence in these matters. Suddenly, a weary woman approaches them, her disheveled appearance suggesting a long night of work. She apologizes for the delay, explaining that she has been confined to the office since the previous day. The newcomer quickly regains her professional composure, offering a warm greeting to the pair. While Anri expresses concern for her sister's well-being, the woman dismisses it, and Makoto prepares for the collaboration ahead. With renewed energy, she beckons them toward the editorial department, promising an engaging and productive session. She leads the way down the corridor, noting that their destination is just a short distance away. She suddenly stops in her tracks, her eyes widening as she notices their intertwined hands. The realization hits her like a bolt of lightning, and she can't help but exclaim her surprise, questioning if the two of them are actually dating. The young girl's face erupts in a deep crimson blush as she frantically pulls away, her voice trembling with embarrassment. She vehemently denies the accusation, insisting that there is absolutely nothing romantic going on between them. Her sister finds this revelation even more staggering, unable to fathom how they can be so close yet remain just friends. Despite her lingering disbelief, she decides to drop the subject for now, promising a much more thorough interrogation once they are back in the privacy of their home. The energetic guide leads them through the threshold, throwing her arms wide to present the bustling heart of the editorial department. The sight of the professional workspace, filled with the tools of their shared passion, leaves both of her companions momentarily breathless. They wander past walls adorned with vibrant posters and promotional displays for popular series, each one a testament to the success they both aspire to achieve. While she notes a new volume she needs to purchase, he finds himself staring at an anime adaptation poster, the weight of his own ambitions settling heavily upon him. She watches him closely, noticing the rare spark of genuine joy and determination in his eyes as he takes in the surroundings. To her, seeing him this happy makes the entire experience feel like a dream that has finally crossed over into reality. The young man steels his resolve as they approach the designated meeting room, his mind focused on the opportunity ahead. He shares a quiet, determined thought with his companion, expressing his desire to forge a new path and a shared dream through the discussions about to take place. He prepares to enter the room alone, receiving a final word of encouragement from his friend as she is directed to a separate waiting area. With a deep breath and a nod of thanks, he steps forward to face the editors, leaving her behind to wait with bated breath. The older sister can't resist one final jab, teasingly remarking that the two of them look exactly like a pair of newlyweds. Her playful drama causes another wave of shock and embarrassment for the young girl, who is left reeling from the unexpected comparison. She leads the way out of the editorial office, prompting the young author to follow while his companion hurries to catch up. Time slips away as the meeting concludes, the hands of the wall clock ticking past 4 as documents are finally tucked away. Having finished the formal discussion, he admits that despite their familiarity, the business side of things still makes him anxious. The editor offers a polite closing, signaling the end of their official session. She apologizes for the dry nature of the meeting, which focused heavily on royalties and contracts, and promises that their next encounter will delve deeper into the creative heart of his story. He responds with an eager, resounding affirmation. Later, as they sit together over drinks, she studies him closely, noting a certain radiance in his expression that wasn't there before. With a mischievous glint in her eye, she suddenly accuses him of having fallen for a younger sister, a claim so unexpected it causes him to choke on his tea in a spray of shock. He sputters a frantic denial, his face flushing a deep crimson, but she merely laughs, explaining that his sincerity makes him the only one she would trust with her precious sibling. Her playful demeanor vanishes in an instant, replaced by a chilling, shadowed smile as she issues a lethal warning. If he ever causes her sister pain, the consequences will be fatal. He can only offer a trembling, terrified nod in response. Desperate to lower the volume of the conversation, he begs her to stop, insisting that they are nothing more than friends, though she simply winks and promises to keep his supposed secret. He eventually gives up, slumping his shoulders in defeat as he realizes that trying to reason with her is an exercise in futility. He stands there, stunned, as Seiko casually mentions his upcoming plans with Henry. The word date hangs in the air, causing him to stammer in confusion, while she playfully suggests they finish their business quickly to avoid keeping her sister waiting. She offers a knowing, gentle look, her eyes softening as she observes his flustered reaction. Turning to leave, she encourages them to enjoy their time together, promising to handle the professional burdens so they can simply be happy. He is left alone for a moment, the question of whether this outing truly qualifies as a date echoing in his mind. His thoughts are interrupted when he finds her waiting just outside, her presence immediately drawing his focus. She rushes toward him, her face full of concern as she peppers him with questions about the meeting and the contract, even teasingly asking if he had been driven to tears. He offers a calm smile, thanking her for the concern and noting how impressive her sister is as an editor. A sense of relief washes over her as she admits she was prepared to storm the room if things had gone poorly. He can't help but chuckle, gently warning her against such drastic measures. As they begin to walk, he reaches down and takes her hand in his, a silent gesture that speaks volumes. She beams at the contact, her energy returning as she suggests they celebrate the successful meeting with pancakes and karaoke. He agrees readily, the tension of the business meeting finally fading away. From the doorway, her sister watches them depart with a hint of envy, shouting a reminder for them to return before dark. She waves back cheerfully, encouraging her sister to focus on her own work as they head off into the afternoon. They walk away from their workplace, the tension of the day finally lifting. She lets out a sigh of relief, admitting how nervous she had been, while he simply acknowledges that the work is done. As they transition into a more crowded district, she notes the shift in atmosphere compared to the business area. He agrees that everything went smoothly, and she eagerly points the way toward her sister's shop, her excitement for pancakes and karaoke bubbling over. She beams with a radiant smile, her cheeks flushed with anticipation for the fun ahead. Walking through the bustling streets, they draw attention from passersby who admire her stylish outfit. He catches her eye and offers a small, genuine smile, clearly enjoying her infectious energy. He checks the time, surprised by how late it has become, just as her phone buzzes with a message. She realizes her sister is already at the shop and waiting for them. Because they took so many detours, they find themselves momentarily turn around. She reads a teasing message from her sister, who asks if she's interrupting a date, leaving him flustered by the persistent suggestion from everyone they know. Despite the confusion, they continue their stroll, and she confesses that simply walking by his side makes even the most ordinary shops look incredible. He remains quiet for a moment, his gaze softening as he takes in the world around them. Moments later, they reach their destination, where a young girl spots them and calls out with joy. The child rushes forward to embrace her, expressing how much she was missed. She returns the affection, gently patting the girl's head and asking how her studies for the upcoming test are progressing. She stands by as the young girl greets them warmly, noting how long it has been since their last meeting and inquiring if they have managed to make any friends. With a mischievous glint, the child announces that she actually has a boyfriend, immediately turning her attention to the young man she considers her big brother. She is immediately met with a flurry of excitement from her older sister, who bombards the group with questions about whether this boy is indeed the one. The older woman playfully warns that their father will need a thorough explanation for this development, leaving the child visibly flustered and overwhelmed by the sudden interrogation. She continues her playful teasing until he gently interjects, suggesting that her intense energy is becoming a bit much for the little one to handle. The older sister laughs it off, declaring that she is absolutely starving and insists that they finally make their way into the shop to eat. He watches as a small hand reaches out to steady itself, the young girl looking up with genuine warmth. She confesses how truly happy she is to be reunited with her older brother figure after such a long time apart, her eyes shining with sincerity. She clings tightly to his arm as they prepare to enter, unwilling to let go even for a moment. The older sister leads the way with a skip in her step, announcing that the shop is just ahead and ready to welcome them. She leads them toward the storefront, which is adorned with a welcoming sign, encouraging everyone to enjoy their time together in a friendly atmosphere. They are met with a polite greeting from a staff member as they step inside the bright interior. The waitress smiles warmly, confirming their party of 3 and gesturing for them to follow her to a table. The attendant's welcome does little to soothe the silver-haired girl, who admits she feels incredibly nervous and out of place in such an elegant establishment. Her sister quickly reassures her, urging her to relax and enjoy the experience as they settle in. She and the younger girl are immediately captivated by the extensive menu, their eyes wide with wonder at the sheer variety of sweet treats available. Across the table, he watches their excitement, noting the overwhelming number of choices presented to them. They debate enthusiastically over the crepes and side dishes, their joy reaching a peak as they point out every tempting item on the page. He finally interjects with a calm smile, reminding them that their original purpose for visiting today was to enjoy the pancakes. He sits quietly as the girl's excitement bubbles over the menu. Chisa's eyes sparkle at the sight of the Mont Blanc and the photogenic pudding, her enthusiasm nearly leading her to call him big brother before he quickly silences her. Aniray, ever the voice of reason, gently reminds them that their original mission was to enjoy the shop's famous pancakes. Seeing the indecision, she brightly suggests a solution. They should simply order everything they want and share it all. The idea catches him off guard, as the concept of a communal meal is still somewhat foreign to his solitary nature. The decision is made quickly after that. They settle on a spread that includes the pancakes, a crepe, and a decadent parfait, their eyes scanning the menu as the anticipation builds. This simple act of planning fills Chisa with pure joy, her face lighting up as she exclaims how much fun she's having. Watching her, he has a quiet realization that this, sharing a meal and making choices together, is exactly what it means to spend time with friends. Aniray, catching his eye, gives a final, happy nod to finalize the order. As they wait, she gazes softly at her companions, a wave of quiet emotion washing over her. The thought that she is finally sharing sweets with friends, something she once believed was a distant dream, brings a gentle warmth to her expression. Their attention is soon drawn to the open kitchen, where the staff is busy at work. Aniray points out the elegant glass being prepared for her parfait, while they all watch with fascination as the crepes are expertly flipped and cooked. The spectacle intensifies when a chef performs a flambe, sending a sudden burst of flame into the air. Both girls lean in, their faces illuminated by the glow, mesmerized by the culinary performance happening right before their eyes. When the dishes finally arrive, they're even more magnificent than the photo suggested. The pancakes, the crepe, and the towering parfait seem to sparkle under the shop's lights, leaving the trio momentarily breathless at the beautiful spread. She takes the first bite of her parfait, her eyes fluttering shut as the flavors hit her palate. The combination of textures and sweetness is perfect, and she can't help but marvel at how gorgeous and delicious the treat truly is. Beside her, the young girl takes a bite of the crepe, her cheeks flushing with delight. It is her very first time experiencing a dessert quite like this, and the sheer joy of the moment is written all over her face. She watches as he takes a bite, his eyes widening in realization. He finally understands the appeal of the fluffy treats that have everyone talking, the sweetness melting away his usual stoicism. Nearby, the young girl and her companion are lost in their own delight, savoring every mouthful of their shared meal. Seeing his hesitation, the silver-haired girl leans in, enthusiastically offering him a taste of her own dessert and insisting that he simply must try it. Though they were once shackled by the weight of their shared history, he decides to let go of his reservations for a moment. With a small, resigned smile, he agrees to accept the offered morsel, acknowledging the bond that has begun to form between them. He reflects on how far they've come. Once, the idea of the three of them walking together, holding hands, and sharing a meal was an impossible dream. In those lonely days, neither she nor their other friend had anyone they could truly rely on, making this simple outing feel like a hard-won victory. She beams at him, her expression radiant as she declares that sweets are always more delicious when shared among friends. Yet, beneath the surface, the lingering shadow of past betrayals still whispers that trust is a fragile thing. Even as she tries to embrace the present, he suddenly pulls back, his face flushing with a mix of embarrassment and confusion at the intimacy of the gesture. Misinterpreting his reaction, she asks with a hint of worry if he dislikes the food or if he's lost his appetite, catching him completely off guard with her earnest concern. To settle her worries, he leans forward and takes the bite directly from her spoon, the sweetness of the treat momentarily drowning out his internal conflict and the noise of the cafe. A genuine, peaceful smile finally graces his face, a rare sight that makes her heart flutter. She quickly turns away, her cheeks burning as she stammers that it's not the food she objects to, but rather the overwhelming surge of joy his simple gesture has sparked within her, threatening to bring her to tears. They strolled down the street, the satisfaction of a good meal evident in their relaxed strides. Chisa beams, her voice full of delight as she thanks them, her appetite seemingly unsated despite the feast they just shared. As the group reaches a crossroads, Aniray enthusiastically proposes a trip to karaoke to keep the momentum going. However, Chisa stops, a look of hesitation crossing her face as she explains that she actually needs to start heading back. She clarifies her situation, mentioning a prior commitment to study with a friend later that day. This mention of a friend immediately piques Aniray's curiosity, her expression shifting to one of playful suspicion as she questions if this is the same person Chisa had mentioned before. Chisa's composure falters, her cheeks flushing as she tries to laugh off the scrutiny. Before the questioning can continue, the young girl waves a cheerful farewell, expressing her genuine gratitude for the time spent together and promising to send a message later as she begins to jog away. They stand together, watching her retreating figure. Aniray remarks with a soft smile that it seems their young companion has truly found a good friend, a sentiment Makoto quietly echoes. Suddenly, the sound of a rubber sole pivoting sharply against the pavement cuts through the air. She spins around one last time, cupping her hands to her mouth to shout a parting wish for them to enjoy their date. The words hang in the air, leaving the pair frozen in a state of pure, wide-eyed shock. He struggles to find his voice, his face burning with embarrassment at the unexpected label, while Aniray, though equally flustered, quickly tries to pivot back to her earlier suggestion of karaoke to break the tension. Eventually, they find themselves settled in a quiet corner, the atmosphere thick with a new, unspoken awareness. While he remains somewhat stiff and uncertain, she focuses on her drink, a faint, lingering blush on her cheeks as she sips through her straw. She leans in close, her eyes bright with anticipation as she asks him to pass the song navigator, curious about his musical choices. Because they are finally settled, she realizes a surprising fact. Despite their time together, she has never actually heard him sing, and she eagerly questions what his go-to karaoke tracks are. In response to her enthusiasm, he looks away slightly, admitting with a sheepish expression that he has never actually sung in front of anyone before, a revelation that leaves her absolutely stunned. Seeing her shock turn into immediate guilt, he quickly clarifies that while he's been to karaoke before, those past visits weren't by choice, as he had been coerced into going by others. To ease her worries, he reaches out and places a gentle, reassuring hand on her head, a gesture that catches her completely off guard. As his hand lingers, she looks up at him, her eyes softening as she whispers a quiet word of thanks for his kindness. The moment stretches between them, silent and heavy with unspoken emotion as she processes the warmth of his touch. With a faint blush coloring her cheeks, she listens as he confesses that being by her side brings him a sense of genuine happiness he rarely finds elsewhere, leaving her heart racing. He continues, explaining that while he had been dreading this outing due to the painful memories associated with karaoke, today felt entirely different. Finally, he offers her a bright, genuine smile, declaring that the experience was wonderful solely because of her presence, his previous anxieties replaced by a newfound sense of joy. He watches as a soft blush creeps across her face, her eyes shimmering with a newfound warmth. Turning toward him, she confesses that their time together was truly special simply because he was there, her gaze lingering on his with sincere affection. She beams with pure, unadulterated joy, clasping her hands together as she exclaims how much fun she had, crediting the entire experience to his presence. A comfortable silence settles between them as they stand side by side, both wearing gentle, genuine smiles that reflect the ease of their bond. However, his expression soon clouds with doubt. He admits that his anxieties about the future and the possibility of his work ever being published weigh more heavily on him than any past trauma. Sensing his hesitation, she leans in with unwavering confidence, assuring him that he has nothing to fear and that, As his friend, she is certain of his eventual success. She then makes a heartfelt promise, suggesting that once his book is finally released, they should go and see it on the shelves together. With a shy but determined look, she drops a sudden revelation. She, too, is working toward publishing a book of her own in the near future. The news catches him completely off guard, his eyes widening in a moment of stunned silence as he processes her words. He can hardly believe it, his voice rising in shock, while she softly adds that her own progress was only possible because of the inspiration he provided. He listens as she beams with a radiant smile, her eyes closed in pure happiness. She confesses that the only reason she has found the joy to write novels once more is because he is by her side, calling him by his nickname with genuine affection. In response to her heartfelt admission, he gently points out that her return to writing is a result of her own hard work, though he can't help but ask for the title of her new project. She immediately flushes a deep crimson, averting her gaze and promising to reveal it at a later time. Seeking to change the subject and enjoy their time together, he leads her into a karaoke room and enthusiastically urges her to pick a song. She remains hesitant, her face still warm from her earlier embarrassment as she mumbles that she will tell him the title eventually. As they stand before the song selection screen, he asks what they should perform, but she seems to be retreating into her shell, her voice barely a whisper. He tries to coax her out, suggesting that she could at least give him a hint about her book, but she remains tight-lipped and flustered. Seeing her struggle, he admits with a sheepish expression that his own repertoire is quite limited, as he doesn't actually know many songs. This confession seems to catch her off guard, her eyes widening as she processes his lack of musical knowledge. Suddenly, a spark of inspiration flashes across her face, a new idea taking hold of her thoughts. With renewed energy, she proposes a different use for the microphones, suggesting that instead of singing, they should shout out their hopes and dreams for the future. He looks at her with a mix of surprise and curiosity, eventually nodding in agreement as her enthusiasm becomes infectious. Despite his initial hesitation and the sheer embarrassment of the situation, he prepares himself as she counts down, reminding him that no one else is listening and that this is their special day. He tries to protest that he wasn't ready, but the momentum is already building. On the count of 3, they both let out a roar into their microphones, their voices echoing in the small room. He finds himself shouting his deepest wish, that he wants to be with her every single day, surprising even himself with the intensity of his declaration. He doesn't stop there, pouring his heart out as he yells about wanting to see their published books lined up together on a shelf and his desire to share more simple moments, like eating pancakes, with her. Beside him, she watches in stunned silence, her own face turning bright red at the raw honesty of his outburst. He covers his face in a wave of overwhelming embarrassment as the weight of his own words sinks in. Beside him, Aniray is equally flustered, her face flushed a deep crimson as she playfully chides him, suggesting that a single wish would have sufficed. The air in the small room is thick with the sudden, raw honesty of their connection. Through the window of the door, the truth of his creative heart is finally laid bare. The title of a novel he has been crafting is The Most Important Person in the World, a silent testament to the feelings he has just shouted aloud. Makoto stands outside with Anri's mother and sister, who are delighted to hear that he's been enjoying himself lately. The mother notes how often he speaks of them, while Siko offers a quick apology for his sister's habitual tardiness, though he assures them it is no trouble at all. She lets out a sleepy yawn, greeting him by his online handle as the mother wonders aloud if her younger daughter has fallen back into her old habit of oversleeping. Seeing the two of them so cheerful, he finds himself blushing, silently admitting that he wouldn't mind waiting an eternity if it meant spending time with both of them. The door finally swings open, and Anri rushes out, breathless as she apologizes for the delay. Her family can't help but tease her about the extra effort she clearly put into her appearance, whispering about the sweetness of young love as they watch her. Flustered by their remarks, she urges him to leave immediately, while he offers a polite bow of farewell to her mother and sister. As they begin their walk, a comfortable yet slightly self-conscious silence settles between them, the morning air still fresh. Elsewhere, Nanako is walking with her classmates, desperately trying to clarify that the recent events at the karaoke bar were nothing more than a massive misunderstanding. Her explanation is cut short when she catches sight of him in the distance, accompanied by another girl. Her companions notice her distraction, suggesting that he seems different from their usual social circle and encouraging her to reach out. Taking a hesitant step forward, she calls out to him, her voice barely a whisper as she starts to say his name. He and his companions stop and turn, while her friends watch the interaction with a mix of curiosity and apprehension, sensing the weight of the unspoken words between them. He turns to Haruka with a calm greeting, offering a small apology for his recent silence and casually mentioning his fondness for grass mochi, leaving her momentarily stunned by the sudden normalcy. Addressing the others, he asks Minami and Kisaragi to look after his sister, explaining that he simply felt she needed to hear the truth from him. The young girl is overwhelmed, her face flushing a deep crimson as she repeats the word sister to herself, finally feeling the weight of the bond he acknowledged. With a wave of his hand, he promises to catch up with them later, leaving the group of girls standing in the street, still processing the revelation. Later at school, he encounters Shizuka in the hallway and immediately notices her new, shorter haircut, offering a polite morning greeting. She assures him that she's doing much better now, while he responds with a simple, reassuring nod as Anri watches the exchange from the side. As he continues on his way, Shizuka lingers for a moment with a soft, contemplative expression before Anri bids her a polite farewell. Settled in their classroom, Anri leans over to ask if he has any skill in basketball, noting that the upcoming sports tournament is fast approaching. He searches his memory, vaguely recalling games of catch from his childhood, while their classmates whisper in disbelief at how comfortably the two are speaking. When he suggests she can drop the formal act, she snaps at the staring students in a flustered defensive outburst, her face turning bright red. She stood there, her face flushed with a deep crimson as she whispered a frantic encouragement to herself, knowing that if she didn't speak now, her courage would surely fail her. This moment of resolve followed a quiet exchange where Nanako offered her sincere thanks. While nearby, Makoto couldn't help but let out a skeptical huff at the spectacle, leaving the surrounding students to whisper in confusion about the nature of their relationship. The seasons shifted rapidly after that day, and a few months later, the bustling city streets were filled with people bundled up against the encroaching chill of winter. Amidst the crowd, she appeared, waving a cheerful greeting while wrapped in a thick coat and scarf, catching the attention of the young man who had just reached a significant personal crossroads. Together, they made their way to a local bookstore, both feeling a mix of trepidation and excitement at the thought that the work they had created together was finally on display for the world to see. Sensing his hesitation, she reached out a gloved hand toward him, her expression softening into a warm, encouraging smile that seemed to melt the winter cold. He took her hand in his, a new and unfamiliar sensation washing over him as their fingers intertwined, grounding him in the reality of the moment. Stepping inside the quiet sanctuary of the shop, the sight of the neatly arranged shelves only intensified the surreal feeling that had been growing within him all morning. They stood side by side before the display, their hearts racing in a synchronized rhythm of nervous anticipation, until she softly suggested they count to 3 before finally looking at their achievement. With a final, shared breath, they reached the end of the countdown, stealing a quick glance at each other before turning their eyes toward the shelf. He gazes at the bookstore shelf where their hard work finally rests. The volumes sit side by side, a physical manifestation of a long journey they shared to reach this moment. Standing beside him, she beams with a mixture of pride and shyness as they take in the sight of their published creations, realizing that their dream has truly become a reality. They notice with a quiet sense of wonder that their books have been placed right next to each other on the display, as if the world itself is acknowledging their bond. A shared laugh erupts between them, a moment of pure, unadulterated joy as the weight of their unspoken feelings begins to surface in the warm atmosphere of the shop. He closes his eyes for a moment, steeling his resolve. He knows he needs to move forward into the future without being weighed down by the shadows of his past, and he decides that today is the day to finally speak his heart. While she playfully admits that the romantic title of their work is a bit embarrassing to see in public, he turns to her with a serious, tender gaze. He calls her name and declares that, in his eyes, she is the most precious person in his entire world. Her eyes widen in surprise, her breath catching as the weight of his confession sinks in, filling her with an overwhelming sense of warmth. With a radiant smile, she reciprocates his feelings, declaring that he is the person she loves most in the world. They stand together, their future as bright and promising as the books on the shelf before them.